My name is Evelyn Davis. I am 27 years old and I work as a senior financial accountant. Right now, I am sitting perfectly still inside a glass-walled boardroom high above downtown Seattle. The rain is lashing against the massive windows, creating a fitting backdrop for the storm raging inside this room. Across the polished mahogany table stands Patricia, my biological mother. Her face is flushed a deep and angry red. She slams both of her hands flat against the expensive wood, causing the sound to echo sharply through the tense and suffocating silence. She is screaming at the estate executor, demanding her share of a $45 million fortune. She is absolutely certain she will walk out of this building today as a newly minted millionaire. She does not even look at me. To her, I am just background noise. I am the exact same insignificant nuisance she discarded exactly 2 decades ago. Looking at her now, watching the greedy desperation twist her features, I feel nothing but a cold and clinical calm. My professional training takes over. As an accountant, I deal in facts in ledgers and in undeniable proof. Patricia is about to learn that the numbers never lie. 20 years ago, she threw me out of her house like unwanted trash simply because I was a financial burden. She left me shivering on a porch in the freezing rain next to 2 black garbage bags. She did not care if I survived that night, but I did survive because the man whose wealth she's currently trying to steal opened his door and saved my life. Uncle Henry gave me a safe home, a brilliant education, and a real family. Now that he is gone, Patricia has crawled out of the woodwork. She brought an arrogant and highly paid attorney, fully prepared to claim a fortune she feels entirely entitled to. She thinks I'm still that weak and quiet little girl who will just sit back and let her rewrite our history. She believes she holds every single card today. She has absolutely no idea that for the past 5 years, I was the one secretly managing Uncle Henry's entire financial portfolio. She has no clue about the thick red binder resting in my lap, which is filled with bank statements, audit trails, and legally binding documents that will completely dismantle her entire life within the next 10 minutes. When my parents disowned me at 7 years old, my wealthy uncle took me in. 20 years later, Mom arrived at his will reading, expecting millions. But she never expected me to be the one holding the keys to the empire. She expected a massive payout, but instead, I shut her up permanently. By the time I was finished, her own lawyer realized the trap she had walked him into and stared at her in absolute horror. Before I tell you exactly how I destroyed her false reality, please take a moment to like and subscribe if you love stories about karma delivering ultimate justice. Drop a comment and let me know what city or state you are watching from right now and what time it is there. Let me take you back to the night this nightmare began. The heavy oak door of the conference room swung open with enough force to hit the walls. Stop. Patricia marched in first. She wore a tailored black dress and pearls projecting the image of a grieving sister, but her eyes darted around the room like a hawk looking for its prey. It had been exactly 20 years since I last saw her in person, but her presence still carried that same suffocating weight. She expected the world to bow to her, and she brought an entire entourage to ensure it happened. Right behind her was Richard. He shuffled in wearing a suit that looked slightly too tight across the shoulders. He kept his gaze firmly fixed on the carpet exactly as he had done 2 decades ago, when I was sitting on that freezing porch. He was a man who survived by never challenging his wife. Then came Jessica, the golden child. She walked in holding a designer handbag prominently in front of her, looking around the corporate boardroom as if picking out new drapes for a house she already bought. She wore a smug smile that she did not even try to hide. Following her was a man I did not recognize, but whom I knew from my background research, Marcus. He was a highly successful architect in the city, an African-American man with a sharp mind and a solid reputation. Unlike the rest of them, he did not look triumphant. He looked distinctly uncomfortable. He adjusted his watch and stood near the back corner, surveying the room with a critical professional eye. He had clearly been told a very specific story about me. I knew the narrative Patricia spun. She probably told him I was a troubled runaway who broke their hearts. But as Marcus looked at me, sitting calmly in a tailored navy suit, with a stack of meticulously organized legal files in front of me, I could see the confusion settling into his features. I did not look like a troubled runaway. I looked like the senior financial accountant I was. Finally bringing up the rear was a man who reeked of expensive cologne and misplaced confidence. "Mr. Sterling, the high-priced attorney Patricia had hired to secure her fortune. He dropped his heavy leather briefcase onto the polished mahogany table with a loud thud, intentionally trying to command the space. Patricia finally let her eyes land on me. I watched the realization hit her that the scared little 7-year-old girl she threw away was now a grown woman sitting at the head of the table. But Patricia only knew one way to deal with me, and that was through pure intimidation. "What is she doing sitting there?" Patricia demanded, her voice slicing through the quiet room. Her tone was sharp and aggressive, designed to make me feel small. "I told your office I wanted this handled privately. This is a family matter." I kept my hands folded neatly over my red binder. I did not flinch. I did not break eye contact. As an accountant, you learn to let the numbers and the documents do the fighting. You let the other side expend all their energy screaming while you hold the proof. Mr. Sterling stepped forward, puffing out his chest. He did not even bother to introduce himself to me. He looked directly at the estate executor sitting to my left. "My client, Patricia Davis, is the sole surviving sister of the deceased," he stated smoothly. "We are here to finalize the transfer of the estate assets as per her legal entitlement. Having estranged parties present is highly irregular and frankly inappropriate." I remained silent. I watched Patricia smirk. She thought she had already won. She thought bringing a shark in a tailored suit would be enough to terrify me into running out the door. "You need to leave, Evelyn," Patricia said, taking a step closer to the table. She leaned forward, placing her manicured hands flat on the wood. "We are here to handle Henry's affairs. You have no business being in this room. You were never really part of this family, and you are certainly not part of this estate. Be grateful Henry gave you a roof over your head, and walk away before you embarrass yourself." The sheer audacity of her words would have shattered me years ago. Now they just sounded pathetic. I looked at Jessica, who was standing behind her mother, nodding in agreement. "Mom is right, Evelyn." Jessica chimed in, her voice dripping with that same fake sweetness I remembered from childhood. "You always try to insert yourself where you do not belong. Uncle Henry was our family. You should just be thankful for whatever charity he gave you, and let us handle the grown-up business." I shifted my gaze to Marcus. His jaw tightened. He glanced at his wife and then back at me. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, clearly disturbed by the open hostility his wife and mother-in-law were displaying. As a successful professional, he knew how boardrooms operated. You do not walk into a legal proceeding and start throwing playground insults unless you are desperate or entirely out of your depth. Marcus was beginning to realize his family was the latter. Mr. Sterling opened his briefcase, pulling out a thick stack of papers. "We are not here to entertain guests," he said, his voice oozing condescension. "We are here to execute a legally binding addendum to Henry's estate. We expect full cooperation and immediate access to all financial records, holding companies, and property deeds associated with his name." He slid a single sheet of paper toward the center of the table. "My client has been generous enough to attend this proceeding in person to expedite the transfer," he continued. "But make no mistake, we will not tolerate any delays or ridiculous claims from individuals who have absolutely zero legal standing." Patricia crossed her arms over her chest, looking down her nose at me. "You heard him, Evelyn. Get out. We have millions of dollars to process today, and I do not want to look at you for 1 second longer than I have to. You were a financial burden to me 20 years ago, and I will not let you be a burden to my inheritance today." Her words hung in the air, toxic and heavy. She wanted me to react. She wanted me to cry, to yell, to throw a tantrum so she could point to me and tell her expensive lawyer that I was unstable, but I offered her absolutely nothing. My face remained a mask of total professional calm. I analyzed her standing there. Her dress was new, probably bought on credit specifically for this occasion. The pearls around her neck were costume jewelry. The desperation rolling off her was palpable. They had not just come here out of greed. They had come here out of a desperate, frantic need. People who are financially secure do not walk into a room making wild, aggressive demands before the lawyer has even finished reading the introductory clauses. They were drowning in debt, and they viewed Uncle Henry's estate as their personal lottery ticket. "I am not going anywhere, Patricia," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried clearly across the large room. I did not raise my pitch or rush my words. I spoke with the exact same tone I used when explaining tax liabilities to corporate clients. Patricia bristled. Her face flushed a deep, angry red. She slammed her hand on the table again. How dare you speak to me that way, she hissed. I am your mother. No, you are not, I replied evenly. You surrendered that title a long time ago. Jessica scoffed loudly. God, you are so dramatic, Evelyn. You ran away because you could not handle our family rules, and now you show up here trying to play the victim. Just leave. You are making Marcus uncomfortable. I looked directly at Marcus. He did not look uncomfortable because of me. He looked deeply disturbed by his wife. He placed a hand on Jessica's arm and whispered something in her ear, leaning in close. I could not hear the exact words, but I saw Jessica pull away sharply, her expression flashing with irritation. She hissed a response back at him, telling him to be quiet. The united front they were trying to project was already showing massive cracks. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat loudly, annoyed that the focus had shifted away from him. Let me make this abundantly clear, he said, pointing a perfectly manicured finger in my direction. If you refuse to vacate this room, I will have building security escort you out. You are interfering with the rightful heirs of a multi-million-dollar estate. We have the legal documents to prove Patricia Davis is entitled to exactly 50% of all assets. He tapped the paper he had thrown onto the table. It is signed. It is dated. It is indisputable. Now stop wasting my billable hours and leave. Patricia smiled a cruel, victorious smile. She thought she had won. She thought the presence of a loud man in a suit with a piece of paper meant she was about to walk out of this building with millions of dollars. She truly believed that after tossing a vulnerable child into the freezing rain, she was finally going to get the ultimate reward for her cruelty. I kept my hands folded over the red binder in my lap. I felt the smooth, cool leather of the cover beneath my fingertips. Inside this binder was every single financial transaction Uncle Henry had made over the last decade. Inside this binder were the audit reports, the bank statements, the routing numbers, and the undeniable proof that Patricia had been actively trying to hack into his accounts while he was lying in a hospital bed. More importantly, I had the original estate documents. I had the legal arsenal to not only stop them, but to absolutely annihilate their entire future. I watched Patricia gloat. I watched Jessica act like a spoiled princess, anticipating a massive payday. I watched Richard stare at his shoes, too cowardly to even look at the daughter he abandoned. They had no idea they had just walked straight into a trap. They thought they were the predators in this room. They were completely unaware that the quiet accountant sitting across from them had spent the last 5 years building an impenetrable financial fortress around Uncle Henry's wealth. You can ask security to come up, Mr. Sterling, I said, keeping my voice perfectly composed. But I assure you they will not remove me. Patricia sneered. You always were an arrogant brat. We have the law on our side, Evelyn. You have absolutely nothing. I slowly opened the cover of my red binder, taking my time, letting the silence stretch and warp the tension in the room. I looked up, meeting Patricia's furious gaze with total, icy indifference. I was no longer the frightened 7-year-old girl crying on a dark porch. I was the architect of their impending destruction. And the demolition was about to begin. The heavy, cloying scent of gardenia and bitter musk drifts across the polished mahogany table, hitting my senses like a physical blow. It is an expensive perfume carefully chosen to project wealth and sophistication, but to my brain, it is nothing but a chemical trigger. The pristine glass walls of the Seattle high-rise instantly dissolve. The quiet hum of the boardroom air conditioning vanishes completely, swallowed by the deafening roar of a violent thunderstorm. I am no longer a 27-year-old senior financial accountant sitting in a multi-million-dollar corporate office. I am 7 years old again, and my entire world is collapsing into absolute darkness. It is a freezing Tuesday night in late November. The Washington rain is falling in thick, heavy sheets, hammering relentlessly against the windshield of my father's rusted sedan. I am sitting in the back seat, pressing my small hands against the icy glass. I am wearing a thin cotton sweater that offers absolutely no protection against the biting cold seeping through the vehicle doors. Next to me sits my older sister, Jessica. She is 9 years old, perfectly dry and warmly wrapped in a plush winter coat. She is completely ignoring the storm outside, entirely focused on a glossy catalogue of elite child modeling agencies resting on her lap. In the passenger seat, Patricia twists her body around to look at me. Her eyes are completely devoid of any maternal warmth. They are the eyes of a woman evaluating a bad investment. She holds 2 thin black plastic garbage bags in her manicured hands. Inside those cheap tearing bags is every single thing I own in the world. A few oversized, hand-me-down shirts, a pair of worn-out jeans, and a small stuffed bear with a missing button eye. That is the absolute sum total of my existence in their house. The car violently jerks to a halt at the end of a long, treacherous gravel driveway. The windshield wipers are fighting a losing battle against the torrential downpour. Richard. My father grips the steering wheel so tightly, his knuckles shine bright white in the dim dashboard light. He refuses to look in the rearview mirror. He stares straight ahead, into the dark, blinding rain, acting as a silent, cowardly accomplice to the ultimate betrayal. Patricia shoves her door open, letting the freezing wind whip fiercely into the warm cabin. She yanks my door open, reaches inside, and grabs me harshly by the wrist. She pulls me out of the car and into the merciless storm. The sudden cold hits me like a solid wall of ice. My cheap canvas sneakers are instantly soaked as I step into a deep, freezing puddle. I stumble forward, my small knees hitting the wet, jagged gravel, tearing the skin. Patricia does not reach down to help me up. Instead, she reaches into the back seat, grabs the 2 heavy black garbage bags, and throws them onto the ground next to me. They hit the mud with a wet, pathetic thud. The sound of the rain crashing against the plastic bags is deafening. I look up at my mother through the darkness. The freezing water is streaming down my face, blinding my vision and mixing with my tears. I'm shaking so violently my teeth are audibly rattling against each other. I desperately ask her what I did wrong. I beg her to let me back into the warm car. I promise, with every ounce of breath in my tiny lungs, to be quieter, to eat less, to never ask for a single toy or treat ever again. Patricia stands towering over me, completely shielded from the elements by a large black umbrella. She looks down at me with an expression of pure, calculating coldness that I will carry in my mind for the rest of my life. "You are nothing but a financial burden, Evelyn," she says, her voice cutting sharply through the roar of the thunderstorm. "You cost too much money to maintain. Jessica has her first big modeling callback in Los Angeles next month. We need professional headshots. We need expensive pageant entry fees. We need plane tickets and hotel travel expenses. Every single dollar we waste feeding and clothing you is a dollar stolen directly from your sister's future. You're standing in the way of her stardom. You're draining this family dry, and we are absolutely done paying for your existence." She speaks the words with chilling clinical precision. There is no hesitation in her voice. There is no guilt. There is not a single shred of maternal instinct left in her soul. She points a manicured finger up the dark, intimidating driveway toward a massive silhouette of a house. She tells me that Uncle Henry lives in the big house at the top of the hill. She tells me to walk up there and knock on his door because I am his financial problem now. Without another word, she turns her back on me, gets into the passenger seat, and slams the heavy door shut. I stand there, entirely paralyzed in the freezing rain. Through the rain-slicked window, I see Jessica looking down at me. She does not look sad or worried. She looks triumphant. A small, satisfied smirk crosses her face before she turns back to her modeling catalog, completely unbothered by the fact that her 7-year-old sister is being thrown away like actual garbage. The car engine revs loudly. The bright red taillights flare, reflecting menacingly in the muddy puddles at my feet. The car reverses quickly out of the driveway, tires spinning in the wet gravel, and speeds away into the dark night. They do not look back, not once. The darkness immediately swallows them whole, leaving me entirely alone in a massive, desolate driveway. The storm rages violently around me. The wind howls, tearing through my soaked cotton sweater, freezing me straight to the bone. I reach down with numb fingers and grab the twisted plastic ties of the garbage bags. I drag them through the thick mud, crying so hard my chest physically aches. The driveway seems miles long to a terrified 7-year-old. Every single step is pure agony. The absolute darkness is suffocating, and I am convinced the shadows moving in the trees are alive. I stumble forward blindly, my breathing ragged and shallow, until I finally reach the large wooden steps of Uncle Henry's sprawling wraparound porch. I climb the steps, drop to my knees, and collapse against the massive front door. I pull the wet garbage bags tight against my chest, sobbing uncontrollably into my freezing hands. I feel entirely hollow. I feel like I am absolutely nothing. Suddenly, the porch light blazes to life, washing the wooden planks in a warm, comforting yellow glow. The heavy oak door swings open wide. Uncle Henry stands in the doorway. He's wearing a thick plaid robe over his flannel pajamas, holding a steaming mug of tea in his right hand. He looks down and sees me shivering violently, a tiny drenched pile of misery huddled against his welcome mat. The mug slips instantly from his fingers, shattering against the hard floorboards, sending hot tea and broken ceramic shards spilling across the wood. He drops to his knees immediately, completely ignoring the broken glass. "Evelyn!" He gasps, his voice thick with raw absolute horror and disbelief. He does not stop to ask questions. He does not hesitate for a single second. He reaches out and pulls me tightly into his chest, ruining his warm, clean clothes with the freezing mud and rain covering my tiny body. He scoops me up effortlessly in his strong arms, carrying me inside the massive house. He kicks the muddy garbage bags inside with his foot and slams the heavy wooden door, shutting out the brutal storm and the unforgiving cruelty of the people who birthed me. The sudden contrast between the freezing terror outside and the profound warmth inside is staggering. He carries me straight into his huge living room where a massive fire is crackling brightly in a stone hearth. He sets me down gently on a plush, oversized leather sofa. He disappears for a brief, frantic moment and returns with a massive, thick fleece blanket. It is the softest, warmest thing I have ever felt in my entire life. He wraps it securely around my violently shaking shoulders, cocooning me in absolute, undeniable safety. He hurries to the kitchen and brings me a fresh, steaming mug of hot cocoa. His large hands are trembling with barely suppressed rage as he looks at my soaked, ruined clothes and the pathetic plastic bag sitting dripping in his pristine hallway. He kneels on the rug directly in front of me, looking deeply into my terrified, tear-filled eyes. "Who did this to you, Evelyn?" he asks, his voice tight with a ferocious anger that scares me at first until I look at his face and realize the anger is entirely directed at them and not at me. I tell him everything between broken, heaving sobs. I tell him exactly what Patricia said about me being a financial burden. I tell him about Jessica's expensive modeling headshots and the flight to Los Angeles. I tell him how my father stared straight ahead and how they drove away into the night without ever looking back. As I speak the trembling words, I watch Uncle Henry's face harden into unbreakable stone. The protective fury radiating from his soul is absolute. He reaches out gently with a warm thumb and wipes a streak of freezing mud from my pale cheek. "You listen to me very carefully, Evelyn," he says, his voice firm, steady, and incredibly grounding. "You are not a burden. You are a profound gift. They are foolish, broken, empty people who do not have the capacity to recognize the incredible, brilliant value of the child sitting right in front of them. From this exact moment on, you are my daughter. You will never be cold again. You will never go hungry again, and you will never ever be thrown away again. I promise you, they will never be allowed to hurt you as long as I draw breath." In that exact miraculous moment, the terrified, abandoned 7-year-old girl died forever, and a new Evelyn was born. That soft fleece blanket was my absolute shield. His fierce protective words were my foundation. That massive house became my impenetrable fortress. He built me back up piece by piece, year after year. He taught me my inherent worth. He taught me how to read complex financial ledgers, how to invest intelligently, and how to aggressively secure my future, so no one could ever leave me shivering in the dark again. He forged a bond of absolute iron trust between us that not even death could break. The memory is so raw, so vividly visceral, that I can actually feel the phantom weight of the freezing Washington rain on my skin. I can taste the bitter dirt in my mouth. I can feel the profound life-saving warmth of that fleece blanket wrapping tightly around my shoulders. The sheer emotional force of the flashback threatens to pull me under completely. But then, a harsh grating sound violently shatters the memory into 1,000 pieces. The freezing rain evaporates instantly. The comforting warmth of Uncle Henry's living room vanishes. The sharp, deafening smack of a hand hitting solid mahogany jerks my consciousness forcefully back to the present moment. I am back in the pristine, brightly lit, glass-walled boardroom in downtown Seattle. The corporate air conditioning hums quietly above me. The rain is safely contained entirely outside the thick, high-rise windows. Patricia is leaning aggressively over the conference table, her face contorted with greedy, impatient rage. Her cloying floral perfume practically chokes the recycled air in the room. The contrast between the heartless monster who abandoned me in the storm and the entitled grieving sister demanding millions today is absolutely nauseating. She looks at me, but she does not actually see me. She does not see the highly successful, independent, 27-year-old senior financial accountant sitting across from her. She only sees a minor, annoying obstacle standing between her and a massive fortune she desperately craves. "Read the actual will," Patricia screams, her voice echoing shrilly off the expensive glass walls. Her eyes dart wildly toward the estate executor, ignoring me entirely. I am sick of sitting here breathing the same air as this ungrateful brat. Henry signed the addendum. "My lawyer has the legal proof right here on this table. We are done wasting time. I demand that you process my 50% of the estate immediately so my family can take what rightfully belongs to us and leave." She glares at me, her eyes brimming with the exact same calculating coldness I remember from that terrifying night in the gravel driveway. I look past her and see Marcus standing tensely in the corner, his intelligent eyes shifting nervously between the aggressively forged documents on the table and his wife's smug, expectant smile. Patricia thinks her loud voice and her arrogant attorney give her absolute unassailable power. She thinks the past is completely buried and forgotten by everyone who matters. She has absolutely no idea that the scared little girl she threw away into the storm is currently holding the keys to the very empire she's trying to steal. She demands the will be read utterly blind to the devastating financial execution I'm about to confidently deliver. The heavy silence in the boardroom stretches so tight, it feels like a physical wire about to snap. Mr. Sterling is a man who makes his living by bullying people into submission. He recognizes that the dynamic in the room has subtly shifted against him. He does not like the way I am sitting perfectly composed with my hands resting on my binder. He does not like that I have not crumbled into tears or begged for mercy. To regain his absolute control, he steps right up to the edge of the mahogany table and unclasps the polished brass locks of his expensive briefcase. The metallic click echoes loudly in the quiet space. He reaches inside and pulls out a crisp white document secured within a thick blue legal jacket. He holds it up for a fraction of a second, ensuring everyone in the room recognizes its official appearance. Then, with a sharp, aggressive motion, he slaps the document directly onto the center of the table. The sharp smack reverberates off the glass walls. "Let us drop the dramatic posturing," he announces, his voice booming with forced authority. "We are not here to listen to the emotional grievances of an estranged niece. We are here to execute the final legally binding wishes of Henry Davis. This document right here is an official addendum to his original estate plan." Patricia suddenly sits up straighter in her leather chair. A hungry, triumphant gleam flashes across her eyes. Richard remains staring at his shoes, but he nervously wrings his hands together. Mr. Sterling smooths his silk tie and looks directly at the estate executor. He completely ignores my presence, acting as if I am nothing but a minor clerical error. This addendum was drafted and signed by Henry just 4 weeks before his unfortunate passing, Mr. Sterling states smoothly. It represents a final moment of profound clarity from a dying man. In this document, Henry explicitly acknowledges the pain and the deep division his actions caused the Davis family over the past 2 decades. He recognized that his isolation from his brother Richard and his sister-in-law Patricia was a mistake born of stubborn pride. I listen to the lawyer's words, and I feel a cold wave of disgust wash over me. The sheer audacity of the lie is staggering. Uncle Henry never felt an ounce of regret for cutting Patricia and Richard out of his life. He despised their greed and he loathed the way they treated me. But I keep my face completely blank. As a senior financial accountant, I know that reacting emotionally to fabricated data only gives the opposing side leverage. I sit back slightly watching them dig their own graves. Therefore, Mr. Sterling continues, his voice rising dramatically to fill the room to make amends for this unfortunate family division. Henry legally mandated that exactly 50% of his entire estate be immediately transferred to Patricia Davis. We have calculated the total value of the properties, the holding companies, and the liquid assets to be roughly $45 million. That means my client is legally entitled to $22.5 million payable immediately upon the execution of this addendum. The sheer magnitude of the number hangs heavily in the air. $22.5 million. I watch Patricia's breathing hitch. She literally pants at the sound of the money. Her eyes are wide and entirely consumed by an intoxicating, frantic greed. She looks like a starving animal finally seeing a massive feast placed just out of reach. She actually licks her lips. Jessica can no longer contain herself. The golden child, who spent her entire life believing she was vastly superior to me, leans forward across the table. Her perfectly styled blonde hair falls over her shoulder as she shoots me a look of pure, unadulterated venom. "You really thought you could steal our money, Evelyn?" She whispers, her voice a vicious hiss that carries easily in the quiet room. "You really thought you could just manipulate a sick old man and take everything that belongs to us? You are nothing but a stray dog that Uncle Henry took pity on. You were garbage when Mom threw you out, and you are garbage now. You do not deserve a single dime of this fortune. Go back to whatever miserable little life you crawled out of before my lawyer has you thrown in a jail cell for elder abuse." Her words are meant to tear me apart. They are meant to reduce me back to that shivering, terrified 7-year-old girl in the freezing rain. But looking at her now, I do not feel intimidated. I only feel pity. Jessica is a woman approaching 30 who still relies on her mother to fight her battles. She has never worked a hard day in her entire life. She has survived entirely on a fabricated narrative of her own superiority, and now that facade is cracking under the intense pressure of their hidden financial ruin. I do not respond to Jessica. I do not defend myself. Instead, I slowly shift my gaze away from her sneering face and look directly at her husband. Marcus is standing completely still in the corner of the boardroom. He is a highly successful architect, a man who has built a brilliant career by paying intense attention to structural integrity and hidden flaws. He knows how to read blueprints, and he knows how to spot when a foundation is crumbling. Right now, he's analyzing the foundation of his own marriage. I watch the exact moment the cognitive dissonance hits him. I know the lies Patricia and Jessica fed him over the years. They told Marcus that I was a deeply troubled, rebellious teenager who ran away from a loving home because I got involved with a bad crowd and drugs. They painted themselves as the heartbroken victims of a tragic family fracture. They told him they tried everything to save me, but I was simply too toxic to keep around. Marcus is an intelligent African-American man who has had to navigate complex corporate environments his entire life. He knows how to read a room. He looks at me sitting at the head of the table. I am wearing a custom-tailored navy suit. My posture is perfectly straight. My demeanor is incredibly calm and entirely professional. I do not look like a drug-addicted runaway. I look like a highly competent corporate executive. Then Marcus looks at his wife. He sees Jessica leaning across the table, her face twisted into an ugly, malicious sneer. He hears the vicious, unhinged cruelty in her voice as she calls me a stray dog and garbage. He sees the absolute gleeful venom she is directing at a woman she has not spoken to in 20 years. Marcus then shifts his intense gaze to Patricia. He sees his mother-in-law practically vibrating in her chair, her eyes wide with a frantic, intoxicating greed at the mention of $22 million. He sees the cheap costume pearls around her neck, which deeply contradicts the stories of vast generational wealth she always brags about at their country club dinners. He sees Richard staring blankly at the floor, completely detached from reality, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. The beautiful, flawless family Marcus thought he married into is completely dissolving right in front of his eyes. He's realizing that he's trapped in a small, suffocating room with strangers. The stories he was told do not align with the reality he is currently witnessing. A loving sister does not spit venom like a cornered snake. A heartbroken mother does not pant with greedy joy at a will reading. And a troubled runaway does not sit at the head of a corporate boardroom managing a massive portfolio of legal documents with total icy precision. Marcus looks down at the white addendum document Mr. Sterling slapped onto the mahogany table. He narrows his eyes. I can literally see the gears turning in his sharp, analytical mind. He's asking himself the exact logical questions an architect would ask. Why would a wealthy man who completely ignored his brother for 20 years suddenly sign away half his empire to the exact same people who threw his niece out into the street? Why would a sophisticated real estate mogul use a cheap, aggressive lawyer like Mr. Sterling instead of his own trusted corporate counsel? The seeds of deep, profound suspicion have firmly taken root in Marcus' mind. He takes a slow, deliberate step away from his wife, physically distancing himself from the toxic energy radiating from her body. Jessica does not even notice. She is too busy glaring at me, entirely consumed by her own malicious joy. Mr. Sterling clears his throat loudly, demanding the room's attention once again. The executor will now verify the signature on this addendum. He dictates, his chest puffed out with arrogant certainty. Once the signature is confirmed, we expect the immediate release of funds. My clients have already endured enough emotional distress today. We will not entertain any further delays. Patricia smiles a wide, terrifyingly triumphant smile. She looks at me, lifting her chin in a gesture of absolute victory. She fully believes the nightmare she inflicted on me 20 years ago is about to be rewarded with unimaginable wealth. She believes she has successfully rewritten history. I look down at my polished red binder. I place my right hand flat against the cool leather cover. I let the arrogant lawyer finish his grand speech. I let Jessica whisper her final pathetic insults. I let Patricia bask in her false temporary glory. They think this addendum is their ultimate weapon. They think it is the key that will unlock their golden future and save them from their hidden crushing debt. They do not realize that the document sitting on the table is completely fraudulent. They do not realize that I have the medical records, the audit trails, and the exact timeline of Uncle Henry's final days locked securely inside my binder. I take a slow, deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool air of the boardroom. The time for observation is officially over. It is time to dismantle their lies piece by piece. It is time to let the numbers speak. Mr. Sterling, I say, keeping my voice perfectly level and completely devoid of the emotional hysteria Patricia is desperately trying to provoke. Before you threaten me with building security again, I highly suggest you sit down, close your mouth, and look at the actual numbers. You walked into this room assuming I was just an estranged niece looking for a handout. That was your first monumental mistake. I place both of my hands flat on the polished leather cover of the massive red binder resting in front of me. I let my eyes sweep across the faces on the opposite side of the mahogany table. Patricia is practically vibrating with indignation. Jessica is glaring at me with raw, undisguised hatred. Richard is staring at the carpet looking like a man marching toward a firing squad. And Marcus, the brilliant architect, is watching me with an intense calculating focus. He is waiting for the structure of this entire situation to finally make sense. I am a senior financial accountant. I continue, my voice echoing clearly of the glass walls of the Seattle high-rise. For the past 5 years, I have not just been Uncle Henry's niece. I have been his dedicated financial controller. I am the sole architect and the exclusive manager of what Uncle Henry called his silent wealth portfolio. The entire room goes completely still. Mr. Sterling freezes his hand, hovering awkwardly above his expensive briefcase. Patricia drops her smug, triumphant smile and replaces it with a look of profound, absolute confusion. Silent wealth. I explain slowly, ensuring every single syllable lands with maximum impact, is a financial strategy utilized by extremely intelligent, self-made individuals. It means structuring your assets, your holding companies, your real estate acquisitions, and your liquid capital in a way that makes you look comfortably middle class on paper while you privately control tens of millions of dollars in secure, diversified investments. Uncle Henry deliberately lived in a modest house and drove a 5-year-old car because he knew exactly what happens when greedy, entitled relatives smell money. He built a financial fortress to protect himself from you, Patricia. And 5 years ago, he handed me the keys to that fortress. I slide the heavy brass latch of the red binder. The loud, sharp click echoes like a gunshot in the silent boardroom. I flip open the thick cover, revealing hundreds of pages of meticulously organized bank statements, routing histories, forensic audit reports, and legally notarized affidavits. 3 months ago, when Uncle Henry's health began to rapidly decline, I conducted a comprehensive forensic audit of his entire estate. I state, turning to the first heavily tabbed section, I locked down every single account. I initiated 2-factor authentication protocols on every single trust fund. I instructed his private banking team to flag any unusual activity directly to my personal secure server. I did this because Uncle Henry warned me that the moment he was incapacitated, the vultures would inevitably start circling. Patricia violently slams her hands on the table again. This is a pathetic bluff, she screams, her voice cracking with sudden frantic panic. You are lying. Henry did not trust you with his money. You are just trying to stall because you know my addendum is going to leave you with absolutely nothing. Mr. Sterling, do something. Have her removed right now. Mr. Sterling does not move. He is a lawyer who survives by reading the shifting power dynamics in a room, and he is currently staring at my meticulously organized binder with a growing sense of professional dread. He knows that an accountant holding a forensic audit file is significantly more dangerous than a grieving sister holding a single piece of questionable paper. I turn to a specific tab marked with a bright yellow label. I slide a thick stack of printed security logs out of the binder and push them across the polished wood directly toward Mr. Sterling. "Let us talk about your client's entitlement to this fortune, Mr. Sterling," I say. Exactly 42 days ago, while Uncle Henry was lying in a hospice bed heavily medicated and fighting for every single breath someone attempted to breach his primary investment accounts at Vanguard, the security system flagged 14 separate failed login attempts. The intruder tried to bypass the security questions using Henry's mother's maiden name, his childhood street address, and his social security number. Patricia's face drains of all color. The angry red flush on her cheeks vanishes instantly, replaced by a sickly, terrifying white. She slowly sinks back into her leather chair, completely paralyzed by the horrifying realization of what I am about to say. When the login attempts failed, the intruder attempted to initiate a fraudulent wire transfer by calling the bank directly and pretending to be Henry's authorized representative. I continue, my voice slicing through the heavy silence like a scalpel. Unfortunately for the intruder, the bank required a verbal authorization code that only Uncle Henry and I possessed. The wire transfer was denied. However, the bank's cybersecurity division immediately traced the internet protocol address of the computer used for the attempted breach. I pause, letting my eyes lock directly onto Patricia's terrified face. The IP address was traced directly to a residential router located in a suburban house in southeast Portland. It was traced to your exact home address, Patricia. You were actively trying to steal millions of dollars from a dying man while he was taking his final breaths. Jessica gasps loudly, covering her mouth with her hand. She turns to look at her mother, her eyes wide with total shock. "Mom, what is she talking about?" Jessica whispers. "Tell them she's lying. Tell them you did not do that." Patricia opens her mouth, but absolutely no words come out. She looks like a fish suffocating on dry land. She knows I have the undeniable digital proof sitting right there on the table. Mr. Sterling slowly pulls the security logs toward him. He adjusts his glasses and reads through the highlighted IP addresses and the time-stamped failure reports. I watch the remaining color drain from his arrogant face. He is a high-priced lawyer, but he's not a fool. He realizes instantly that his client has committed documented attempted wire fraud. But attempting to rob a dying man is not even the most interesting thing I discovered during my forensic audit, I say, turning to the next tab in my red binder. I look directly at Jessica. She is staring at her mother, breathing heavily, her perfect facade completely crumbling under the weight of this public humiliation. I decide it is time to dismantle the golden child's false reality. "You see, Jessica," I begin speaking to her with cold clinical precision. "You have spent your entire life believing you are inherently superior to me. You believed Patricia when she said I was a financial burden. You believed her when she told you that throwing me out into the freezing rain was the only way to protect your brilliant future as a child model. You built your entire identity on the illusion of your own elite status." Jessica glares at me, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "Shut up, Evelyn," she hisses, her voice trembling. "You know nothing about my life. I have a massive trust fund from my childhood career. Marcus and I are building a custom home. We are completely secure. You're just jealous because Mom actually loved me." I feel a brief flicker of profound pity for the woman sitting across from me. She has absolutely no idea that her entire existence is a carefully constructed house of cards. I pull a second stack of documents from my binder. These are stamped with the official logo of a prominent national bank. "There is no trust fund, Jessica, I state plainly." The entire boardroom goes completely dead silent. Even the estate executor sitting next to me stops breathing. Marcus, the successful architect, physically reacts to my words. He steps away from the wall, his dark eyes locking onto the documents in my hands. His entire posture shifts from uncomfortable observation to intense, alarming focus. He has been paying taxes on that imaginary trust fund for years. "What are you talking about?" Jessica demands, her voice rising to a frantic, shrill pitch. "Of course, there is a trust fund. Mom set it up when I booked my first national commercial. It has been growing for 20 years. I slide the bank statements across the table, stopping them directly in front of Marcus. He reaches down and picks them up, his large hands gripping the paper tightly. I audited those accounts as part of a comprehensive background check on all immediate family members, attempting to claim a connection to this estate. I explain, keeping my eyes fixed on Marcus as he reads the devastating numbers. Patricia did open a child actor trust account for you when you were 8 years old, Jessica. Over the course of your childhood modeling career, exactly $412,000 was deposited into that specific account. Jessica smiles, a desperate, frantic smile turning to her husband. See, Marcus, I told you. The money is right there. Read the withdrawal columns, Marcus. I say quietly. Marcus flips to the second page of the bank statement. I watch his strong jaw clench so tightly I can actually see the muscle feathering beneath his skin. His eyes scan the meticulous rows of numbers, absorbing the horrifying reality of what his mother-in-law has done. The balance is zero. Marcus says, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that sends a profound chill through the entire room. The account is completely empty, Jessica. It has been empty for over 10 years. Jessica practically lunges across the table, snatching the documents from her husband's hands. No, she screams, staring wildly at the zeros printed on the official bank letterhead. No, this is a fake. This is a forged document. Mom, tell them this is a lie. Tell them the money is in escrow. Patricia cannot look at her own daughter. She stares down at her lap, her hands shaking violently. Every single time you booked a commercial or a print campaign, Jessica, your mother transferred the funds out of your protected account within 48 hours, I explain. Methodically tearing down her entire worldview. She did not save a single dime for your college education. She did not save anything for your future. She squandered every single dollar you ever earned to fund a completely fake affluent lifestyle. I pull out a detailed spreadsheet tracing the exact flow of the stolen money. She spent your childhood earnings on leasing luxury cars she could not actually afford. She spent it on ridiculous country club dues to impress neighbors who secretly despised her. She spent it on expensive designer clothes and extravagant vacations just to project the illusion of extreme wealth. She literally stole your entire future to buy herself temporary status, and when the modeling jobs dried up and the money ran out, she had to find a new way to fund her delusions. Jessica is hyperventilating now. She drops the bank statements onto the table, backing away from her mother, as if Patricia is suddenly radioactive. You stole my money, Jessica whispers, her voice breaking into a devastated, pathetic sob. You told me the trust was locked until I turned 30. You told me Marcus and I could use it to build our house. Patricia finally snaps. She shoots up from her chair, pointing an aggressive, trembling finger at Jessica. I gave you everything, she screams, her voice echoing shrilly in the glass room. I paid for the expensive headshots. I paid for the elite acting coaches. I drove you to every single audition. That money belonged to me as compensation for my endless sacrifices. You would be absolutely nothing without me. Marcus steps forward, placing his body firmly between his weeping wife and her unhinged mother. He looks at Patricia with an expression of profound, absolute disgust. He realizes in this exact moment that the woman standing in front of him is not a loving mother. She is a parasitic monster who consumed her own child's future to feed her limitless vanity. But the theft of a childhood trust fund is only the tip of this financial iceberg. I continue, my voice cutting through the chaotic screaming match. Mr. Sterling looks up at me, his arrogant demeanor completely erased. He is now sweating profusely, his expensive cologne entirely overpowered by the distinct smell of his own fear. When Patricia completely drained Jessica's accounts, she had to find a new way to maintain her fake affluent lifestyle. I explained, pulling the final and most devastating stack of documents from my red binder. So she turned to the only option left for people desperate to pretend they are rich. She turned to predatory lending. I slide a thick, heavily redacted file across the mahogany table. Mr. Sterling does not even try to stop me. He simply stares at the paperwork, realizing his client has lied to him on a catastrophic level. Over the past 7 years, Patricia and Richard have taken out 4 separate, high-yield, collateralized debt loans, I state, watching Richard physically flinch at the mention of his secret shame. They took out 3 completely reckless second mortgages on a house that was already heavily underwater. They maxed out 11 different premium credit cards, utilizing cash advance features with astronomical interest rates just to keep up appearances. I tap my finger firmly against the top document. You are not a wealthy woman mourning the loss of a beloved brother, Patricia. You are a desperate drowning fraud, As of this exact moment, you and Richard are carrying roughly $2.8 million in unsecured toxic debt. Your minimum monthly payments exceed your combined income by exactly 400%. The entire boardroom is so quiet, I can hear the rain hitting the glass outside. Patricia is standing perfectly still, her chest heaving, her eyes wide with total, inescapable terror. She knows the absolute truth has finally cornered her. You came into this room today demanding millions of dollars because you are completely bankrupt. I say, delivering the final crushing blow to her financial facade. You tried to hack a dying man's bank accounts because 2 days ago, your primary lender officially initiated foreclosure proceedings on your house. You did not come here for family, Patricia. You came here for a desperate, pathetic bailout because you're about to lose absolutely everything. Marcus turns to look at his wife, his dark eyes filled with a terrifying cold clarity. He realizes the entire foundation of their marriage, the wealthy family, the promised trust fund, the elite status was built entirely on a vicious, pathetic lie. And I'm only just getting started. The heavy silence in the boardroom is so profound that I can actually hear the rhythmic ticking of the expensive watch on my lawyer's wrist. The air feels incredibly thick and heavy with the devastating weight of the financial truth I have just unleashed. Patricia is slumped back in her chair, looking like a deflated balloon. The arrogant attorney, Mr. Sterling, is completely frozen, staring at the table as if it might suddenly catch fire. But my focus is entirely on Marcus. Marcus is a brilliant African-American architect who has spent his entire professional life designing structures built to withstand massive amounts of pressure. He knows exactly how to spot a fatal crack in a foundation. Right now, he's staring at the foundation of his own marriage and watching it crumble into absolute dust. I keep my posture perfectly straight as I gently push the stack of highlighted bank statements directly across the smooth mahogany wood. The papers slide with a soft scratching sound, stopping exactly an inch away from his tightly clenched hands. Go ahead, Marcus, I say quietly, my voice perfectly measured and calm. Read the numbers for yourself. Look at the exact dates of the withdrawals and compare them to the timeline of your wife's financial stories. Jessica frantically reaches out, her manicured hands trembling violently as she tries to snatch the documents away before her husband can touch them. Marcus, do not look at those, she begs, her voice shrill and desperate. She is lying. Evelyn forged these papers just to turn you against me. Mom, tell him she's lying. Please tell him. But Patricia says absolutely nothing. She's entirely paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of her exposure. Marcus does not let Jessica take the papers. He reaches out with absolute authority and pins the documents to the table with his large hand. He looks at his wife, and the expression on his face sends a genuine chill through the room. It is not an expression of anger. It is an expression of profound, devastating betrayal. He slowly pulls the stack of bank statements toward him, his eyes locked onto the black and white ink that dictates the undeniable reality of his life. I watch his eyes scan the first page. I know exactly what he's looking at. I know the lie Jessica sold him because, as Uncle Henry's secret financial controller, I ran comprehensive background checks on everyone attempting to claim a piece of this estate. Jessica told you that her childhood modeling money was locked securely in a pristine escrow account, Marcus, I say, keeping my tone steady and professional. She told you the trust was structured to mature when she turned 30 and that it held close to $1 million. She promised you that this phantom money would be used to build your custom dream home in the suburbs. She painted a beautiful, flawless picture of generational wealth and security. Marcus turns to the second page, his breathing becoming visibly shallow. His strong shoulders tense under his expensive suit jacket. But the lie goes so much deeper than just a fake savings account. I continue refusing to give them a single moment to breathe. Jessica told you that the trust generated significant annual interest. She told you that because the funds were locked, the yearly tax burden on that phantom interest had to be paid out of pocket. For the past 4 years, Marcus, you have been dutifully paying the taxes on a trust fund that literally does not exist. You used your own hard-earned salary from the architecture firm to pay the IRS for imaginary capital gains, all while your wife and your mother-in-law secretly laughed behind your back. The realization hits Marcus like a physical blow to the chest. He drops the papers onto the table and stares at the final balance printed boldly at the bottom of the page. $0.00. The account was completely drained 10 years ago. Jessica is sobbing now. Loud, ugly gasps that echo pitifully against the glass walls. Marcus, baby, please, listen to me, she pleads, grabbing his forearm. I did not know. I swear I did not know the money was gone. Mom told me it was safe. Mom handled all the taxes and the paperwork. I was just repeating what she told me. Marcus slowly turns his head to look at his wife. He looks down at her hand, gripping his arm, and then he physically recoils, pulling away from her touch as if it burns. Do not play the victim with me, Jessica, Marcus whispers, his voice dropping to a low, terrifying register. You sat at our kitchen table every single April and watched me write a $5,000 check to the IRS to cover your supposed tax liability. You watched me drain my own savings to protect your future. You looked me right in the eyes and thanked me for being a good, supportive husband. It was Mom, Jessica cries, pointing a shaking finger at Patricia, who is still sitting completely frozen in her chair. She is the one who took the money. She is the one who lied to both of us. Marcus slams his hand flat against the mahogany table. The sudden violent sound makes Mr. Sterling jump in his seat. You signed the joint tax returns, Jessica Marcus whispers fiercely, leaning incredibly close to her face. Do you have any idea what you have done? I am a licensed architect. I bid on massive state and federal contracts. My entire career is built on my personal and professional integrity. By forcing me to file fraudulent tax returns based on a completely fabricated trust fund, you have knowingly made me an accomplice to federal tax fraud. You did not just steal my money, Jessica. You actively jeopardized my entire career and my freedom. The boardroom tension skyrockets to an absolute breaking point. The polished united front they marched in with has completely shattered. They are no longer a wealthy, powerful family demanding their rightful inheritance. They are a pack of cornered animals viciously turning on each other to save their own skins. Patricia finally finds her voice. She leans forward, her face pale and shining with cold sweat. Marcus, you need to calm down, she stammers, trying desperately to regain her typical commanding tone, but completely failing. We can fix this. We can hire a discreet accountant to amend the previous tax returns. Nobody has to know about any of this. Henry's estate has more than enough liquid cash to cover everything. Once we get my 50%, we will make you whole. We will pay you back every single dime and buy that house you want. Marcus looks at Patricia with absolute pure disgust. He looks at her as if she is the most repulsive creature he has ever encountered in his entire life. You are completely delusional, Patricia, he whispers, his voice shaking with raw, suppressed rage. You really think I want a single penny of your stolen money? You really think you can just buy your way out of the fact that you used my marriage as a convenient vehicle for financial fraud? He turns back to Jessica, who is wiping her mascara-stained tears with a trembling hand. How long did you know? Marcus asks her, his voice chillingly calm. Look me in the eyes and tell me the absolute truth right now. How long did you know the trust fund was entirely empty? Jessica shakes her head frantically. I swear, Marcus, I just found out recently. Mom confessed a few months ago when the credit card company started calling the house. She said she needed a little more time to replace the funds before we started building our house. I was scared. I did not know how to tell you. I thought if we just got Uncle Henry's money, we could fix it before you ever found out. So you knew, Marcus says, stepping entirely away from her. You knew your mother had stolen everything. You knew we were filing fraudulent documents. And instead of coming to your husband and telling the truth, you decided to actively participate in a criminal conspiracy to extort a dying man. Jessica reaches for him again, but Marcus holds up his hand, stopping her completely in her tracks. Do not touch me, he says firmly. I sit quietly at the head of the table, watching the beautiful, devastating destruction of their toxic dynamic. I do not feel any guilt. I do not feel any remorse. Dr. Hayes, my therapist, told me that justice is simply the natural consequence of the truth coming to light. I am merely the messenger delivering the reality they worked so hard to bury. For 15 years, Patricia controlled the narrative of this family. She convinced everyone that I was a worthless burden and that Jessica was a golden treasure. She built a glittering monument to her own vanity and funded it entirely with predatory loans and stolen childhood earnings. Now the sunlight has finally hit the rotting wood of her monument and the entire structure is collapsing. Mr. Sterling, the arrogant lawyer who barged into this room demanding respect, is now frantically packing his legal pads into his expensive briefcase. He refuses to look at Patricia. He refuses to look at Richard. He knows that sticking around this absolute disaster is a direct threat to his legal license. Marcus ignores the lawyer entirely. He focuses solely on the weeping woman he married. "You stood in the hallway outside this room," Marcus says to Jessica, his voice dripping with profound disappointment, and whispered about how Evelyn was garbage. "You called her a stray dog. You mocked her for being thrown out of her own home." He gestures toward me, acknowledging my presence with a nod of deep, profound respect. "Look at her," Jessica Marcus demands, pointing firmly at me. "Look at the woman you called garbage. She's sitting here, holding the absolute undeniable truth while you are drowning in your own pathetic lies. She built an incredible career and secured a massive portfolio while you spent your entire life playing dress-up with stolen money. You are exactly like your mother. You are both completely empty inside." Jessica covers her face with both hands, sobbing uncontrollably into her palms. Richard continues to stare blankly at the floor, completely paralyzed by his own lifelong cowardice. Patricia grips the edge of the mahogany table, her knuckles white, her breathing jagged and loud in the quiet room. "We are not done," Patricia says, her voice a desperate, raspy hiss. She looks wildly at her departing lawyer. "Mr. Sterling, do not put those files away. We still have the addendum. Henry signed the paper giving me half of this estate. It does not matter what mistakes were made in the past. That document is legally binding. Once I get my money, this entire conversation will be completely irrelevant." Patricia clings to that single piece of paper like a drowning woman clinging to a tiny piece of driftwood. She truly believes that her forged addendum is a magical shield that will protect her from the devastating consequences of her own actions. She refuses to accept that her game is officially over. I watch her desperate, frantic clinging, and I feel a deep, satisfying calm settle over my entire body. I close the bright yellow tab in my red binder and slowly move my hand to a section marked with a crisp blue label. Patricia wants to talk about her legally binding addendum. She wants to demand her 50% payout based on a signature she believes is her ultimate salvation. She has absolutely no idea that I am about to spring a legal trap so perfectly designed, so meticulously calculated, that it will not only destroy her claim to the estate, but will legally erase her entirely from my existence. The heavy mahogany table separates us physically, but the absolute, undeniable truth separates us entirely. The final stage of this devastating corporate confrontation is now officially ready to begin. The air in the glass-walled boardroom is practically vibrating with the toxic fallout of my financial revelations. Patricia is backed into a corner, but a narcissist never truly surrenders. They just double down on their delusions. She realizes that her pristine family image is completely shattered. Marcus is standing by the window, radiating pure disgust toward his weeping wife, Jessica. Richard is shrinking into his chair, looking like a hollow shell of a man, but Patricia refuses to acknowledge the crushing reality of her $2.8 million in toxic debt. She refuses to accept that I have entirely dismantled her fake affluent lifestyle. Instead, she fixes her frantic, manic eyes on the thick blue folder resting under Mr. Sterling's trembling hand. "Read the will," Patricia shrieks, her voice cracking violently as it echoes through the pristine corporate space. She points a perfectly manicured finger at the estate executor sitting quietly at the head of the mahogany table. "I do not care about these ridiculous bank statements. I do not care about Evelyn's pathetic little accounting tricks. None of this matters. Henry signed a legal addendum giving me 50% of his entire estate. Read the official will right now and process my money so I can leave this miserable room." She adjusts her posture desperately, trying to project an aura of wealthy entitlement. She actually smooths the wrinkles from her black morning dress and lifts her chin. She truly believes that a single sheet of forged paper is going to magically erase her impending bankruptcy and grant her over $22 million. The estate executor, a poised older woman named Attorney Mitchell, looks at Patricia with profound professional disdain. Attorney Mitchell has managed high net worth clients for over 3 decades. She knows exactly what a desperate, greedy relative looks like. She does not rush. She deliberately takes her time picking up a silver letter opener to break the heavy red wax seal on Uncle Henry's official last will and testament. The sharp tearing sound of the thick parchment paper commands the absolute attention of every single person in the room. As requested by the family of the deceased Attorney Mitchell, announces, her voice projecting smooth, unwavering authority. I will now read the final will and testament of Henry Davis, executed and notarized exactly 6 months prior to his passing. Patricia practically leans over the mahogany table, her eyes wide with intoxicating greed. She glances at Mr. Sterling, gesturing for him to hold his addendum ready. Jessica stops her pathetic sobbing for just a moment, wiping her mascara-stained cheeks. The sheer promise of millions of dollars is enough to temporarily distract her from the absolute collapse of her marriage. They are both waiting for the payout. Attorney Mitchell adjusts her reading glasses. We will bypass the preliminary administrative clauses and proceed directly to the inventory of assets, she states, flipping past the first few pages. At the time of his death, the estate of Henry Davis includes the following fully owned and unencumbered assets. 14 commercial real estate properties located across the greater Seattle metropolitan area. 3 residential apartment complexes. A diverse portfolio of mutual funds and aggressive growth stocks. Multiple private holding companies and a considerable volume of liquid capital currently held in secure offshore trust accounts. Attorney Mitchell pauses, looking up from the document to let the magnitude of the wealth settle over the room. The comprehensive valuation of the combined estate, taking into account all business holdings, real estate, and liquid assets, totals exactly $45,800,000. A collective gasp escapes Jessica's lips. Patricia's eyes practically bulge out of her skull. Her breathing becomes heavy and erratic. $45 million. In her twisted mind, she's already calculating her 50% cut. She's already spending the $22 million she thinks she's about to receive. She's imagining paying off her massive secret debts, keeping her foreclosed house, and maintaining her fake upper-class status at the country club. The sheer volume of Uncle Henry's silent wealth is staggering to them. They always knew he was comfortable, but they never comprehended that the man who drove a 5-year-old car and lived in no modest home was secretly commanding an empire. Attorney Mitchell turns to the next page of the heavy document. Her tone shifts, becoming incredibly sharp and profoundly deliberate. I will now read Article 4, which details the specific bequests and explicit disinheritances mandated by the deceased. Patricia smiles a wide, predatory smile. She shoots me a look of absolute venom, fully expecting to hear her name validated by a massive financial reward. I direct your attention to the specific mention of my biological brother Richard, and my sister-in-law Patricia. Attorney Mitchell reads aloud, her voice slicing through the heavy silence. I leave absolutely nothing to Richard or Patricia. I explicitly and intentionally disinherit them from any and all portions of my estate. I make this decision with a completely clear mind and a profound understanding of their character. Patricia's victorious smile instantly vanishes. Her face contorts into a mask of pure shock. Attorney Mitchell does not stop. She continues reading Uncle Henry's final devastating words. 20 years ago, Richard and Patricia deliberately abandoned a vulnerable 7-year-old child in a freezing rainstorm because they viewed her as a financial burden to their selfish ambitions. They threw my niece away like garbage. They demonstrated a level of heartless cruelty that fundamentally, permanently severed any familial bond we ever shared. They have never once expressed remorse. They have never once sought redemption. They are entirely devoid of moral integrity, and they are motivated solely by greed. Therefore, they shall not receive a single cent, a single piece of property, or a single item of sentimental value from my life. No! Patricia gasps, her voice, a choked, terrified whisper. Richard slumps even further into his chair, looking like a man who has just been completely crushed by a falling building. Furthermore, Attorney Mitchell reads, her voice ringing with absolute finality. I hereby name my brilliant, dedicated, and deeply loved niece, Evelyn Davis, as the sole legal beneficiary of my entire estate. The silence in the boardroom shatters into a million pieces. She inherits the absolute entirety of my $45 million portfolio. Attorney Mitchell states, firmly closing the heavy document. She inherits all holding companies, all commercial properties, and all liquid trusts. Evelyn has managed this silent wealth portfolio with incredible integrity for the past 5 years. She is my daughter in every single way that matters. The empire belongs completely to her. Patricia erupts into a violent, unhinged tantrum. She physically leaps out of her leather chair, knocking it backwards so hard it crashes loudly against the glass wall. She slams both of her fists onto the mahogany table, screaming at the top of her lungs. Her face is purple with uncontrollable rage. That is a lie. Patricia shrieks, her voice completely devoid of any remaining sanity. That is a fraudulent document. Henry would never do that. He signed an addendum. He signed a legal contract giving me half of that money. Mr. Sterling, show them the paper right now. She grabs the blue legal jacket containing her forged addendum and literally shoves it across the table toward the executor. You read this right now, Patricia screams, spit flying from her lips. This supersedes your fake will. I am entitled to $22 million. You are not giving my money to this worthless, ungrateful brat. I will sue this entire firm. I will drag you all through court for the next 10 years. I am getting my money. Jessica jumps to her feet, joining her mother's hysterical meltdown. You cannot do this to us, Jessica wails, pointing an accusing finger at me. You manipulated him, Evelyn. You brainwashed a dying man to steal our inheritance. Marcus, tell them this is illegal. You are an architect, you know people. Tell them they cannot steal our money. Marcus does not move a single muscle to help her. He stands perfectly still, his arms crossed over his chest, watching his wife and his mother-in-law completely humiliate themselves. The absolute disgust radiating from him is palpable. He is looking at two women who are so consumed by greed that they are throwing a literal screaming tantrum in a corporate boardroom over money they never earned. Mr. Sterling, the expensive, arrogant lawyer, is frozen in his seat. The color has entirely drained from his face. He is staring at the official will and then staring at the screaming, unhinged woman who hired him. He is a man who knows the law. He knows that an official comprehensive estate document managed by a reputable firm completely destroys the credibility of a single typed page brought in at the 11th hour. I will not leave this room without my check, Patricia howls, pounding her fists repeatedly on the table like a spoiled toddler denied a toy. I demand my 50%. Henry owed me that money. He owed us for having to put up with his ridiculous self-righteous attitude. This whole thing is a scam. Evelyn is a thief. I will destroy you, Evelyn. I will completely destroy your life. Paid. I sit perfectly still at the head of the table. I do not raise my voice. I do not show an ounce of fear. I simply watch her burn her own facade to the ground. She thinks screaming louder will somehow change the undeniable reality of the documents. She thinks intimidation will force me to hand over the millions she desperately needs to save her sinking ship. She's wildly pointing at her lawyer's addendum, demanding it be recognized as the ultimate truth. She has absolutely no idea that her forged addendum is not her salvation. She has no idea that she just handed me the exact weapon I need to trigger the final devastating trap I have meticulously prepared. I place my hands firmly on my red binder, ready to deliver a legal blow that will completely obliterate her existence. Patricia is still panting heavily from her explosive screaming fit. Her chest heaves under her black morning dress, and her hand grips the blue legal jacket containing her supposed addendum like a weapon. She glares at me with an absolute blinding hatred waiting for me to cower. She expects me to be intimidated by her volume. She expects the estate executor to immediately halt the proceedings and validate her demands just because she's throwing a violent tantrum. She believes that whoever screams the loudest in a room automatically wins the argument. I do not scream. I do not even raise my voice by a single decibel. I simply let the echo of her hysterical outburst fade completely into the thick, heavy silence of the corporate boardroom. I fold my hands neatly on top of my red binder, and I look directly past my raging mother to lock eyes with her high-priced attorney. Mr. Sterling, I say, my voice perfectly level and clinically detached. Before we even begin to entertain the absolute absurdity of the document you just pulled out of your briefcase, we need to address a fundamental principle of probate law. I am sure a lawyer of your supposed caliber is intimately familiar with the legal concept of standing. Mr. Sterling shifts uncomfortably in his leather chair. He clears his throat, adjusting his expensive silk tie. He tries to project an aura of unbothered confidence, but I can see the tiny bead of sweat forming at his temple. Of course I am familiar with legal standing, he replies defensively. My client, Patricia Davis, is the sister-in-law of the deceased and your biological mother. She has absolute undeniable standing to contest this estate and present a legally binding addendum to the court. Patricia lifts her chin emitting a loud scoff of arrogant agreement. You hear that, Evelyn? She spits, her voice dripping with toxic venom. I am your mother. I am Henry's family. You cannot just erase my bloodline with a few typed pages in a fake will. I have every single right to be in this room, and I have every right to take what is mine. I nod slowly, maintaining my unbreakable composure. You are absolutely right about one thing, Patricia. I say, my tone dropping to a quiet, dangerous register. A biological mother would indeed have standing to contest a family estate. A legal family member would possess the inherent right to challenge the distribution of assets. That is exactly how the legal system is structured to protect legitimate relatives. I unlock the metal rings of my massive red binder. The sharp mechanical snap echoes through the silent room, making Richard flinch in his seat. I bypass the thick sections containing the forensic financial audits and the bank statements. I turn to the very back of the binder to a section secured behind a heavy black plastic divider. But you see, Mr. Sterling, I continue smoothly, withdrawing a crisp, perfectly preserved document encased in a clear protective sleeve. In order to claim the privileges of family in a court of law, one must actually be legally recognized as family. I slide the document across the polished mahogany table. I do not slide it toward Patricia. I slide it directly toward Mr. Sterling. The document stops exactly in front of his folded hands. It is printed on thick archival paper and bears the unmistakable raised golden seal of the Washington State Family Court System. Read the title of that document, Mr. Sterling. I command, my voice ringing with absolute, undeniable authority. Read it aloud so your client can fully comprehend exactly why she's about to walk out of this building with absolutely nothing. The arrogant lawyer looks down at the paper. He reaches out with trembling fingers and adjusts his reading glasses. The entire room holds its breath. Even Jessica stops her pathetic sniffling to stare at the lawyer. Marcus, the brilliant architect, steps closer to the table, his dark eyes narrowing with intense analytical focus. Mr. Sterling opens his mouth, but he seems physically unable to speak. The remaining color drains completely from his face, leaving him looking like a ghost in an expensive suit. Read it, I say, my voice slicing through the tension like a razor. Voluntary relinquishment of parental rights and permanent legal severance of familial ties. Mr. Sterling reads his voice barely above a hoarse, terrified whisper. Patricia gasps. Her hands fly to her mouth as if she has just been physically struck. Richard groans out loud, a pathetic whimpering sound, as he buries his face in his hands. Let me provide some crucial historical context for the room. I say, leaning forward and looking directly into Patricia's wide, panicked eyes. 20 years ago, after you threw me onto a freezing porch in the middle of a torrential rainstorm, Uncle Henry took me into his home. He fed me. He clothed me. He provided a safe environment for a terrified 7-year-old girl. But Uncle Henry was also an incredibly principled man. He believed in accountability. So exactly 1 month after you abandoned me, he filed a formal petition in family court demanding that you and Richard pay monthly child support for my care. Patricia shakes her head violently, her face flushing with renewed outrage. We did not have the money, she protests loudly, trying to justify her unthinkable cruelty to the horrified room. We were struggling. Jessica needed funding for her modeling career. Henry was already rich. He did not need our money to raise you. It was completely unfair of him to demand a single dime from us. I smile a cold, hollow smile. That is exactly what you told the judge, Patricia, I say. I have the court transcripts right here in this binder. You stood in front of a family court judge and explicitly stated that paying child support for your youngest daughter would cause a severe financial burden on your oldest daughter's child acting career. You literally argued that my basic survival was interfering with Jessica's pageant fees. Marcus slowly turns his head to look at his wife. Jessica shrinks back into her chair, refusing to meet her husband's disgusted gaze. Marcus is an African-American man who has worked tirelessly his entire life to build a solid, honorable family. The sheer realization that the wealthy, sophisticated family he married into actually sold their own child to avoid a monthly support payment hits him like a freight train. He looks at Patricia with an expression of profound, absolute revulsion. Uncle Henry did not actually need your money, I explained calmly, maintaining my intense focus on Patricia. He simply wanted to see if there was a single shred of human decency left in your soul. He wanted to see if you would take basic financial responsibility for the child you brought into this world. But you proved him absolutely right. You refused to pay. So Uncle Henry offered you a legal compromise. I point a firm finger at the document resting under Mr. Sterling's shaking hand. Uncle Henry told you that he would drop the child support lawsuit entirely if you signed a legal document severing all parental rights and granting him full permanent sole custody. He offered you a way out of your financial obligation, and you signed that document, Patricia. You and Richard signed it in less than 5 minutes. You traded your biological daughter away permanently just to save a few $100s a month. The silence in the boardroom is suffocating. The estate executor, Attorney Mitchell, watches Patricia with an expression of cold professional disdain. The truth is hanging in the air, toxic and undeniable. That document does not change the fact that we are related. Patricia screams, her voice breaking into a hysterical screech. It does not change my blood. Henry was my brother-in-law. You are my biological daughter. A piece of paper from 20 years ago does not erase my family ties. I am still legally entitled to contest this estate. I shake my head slowly, letting out a deep sigh of artificial pity. You really should have hired a better lawyer, Patricia, I say smoothly. Or at the very least, you should have been honest with the lawyer you hired. I turn my attention directly to Mr. Sterling, who looks as though he is actively trying to melt into the floor. Please explain the legal mechanism of a voluntary relinquishment to your client, Mr. Sterling, I command. Explain to her exactly what happens when a parent signs a permanent severance order in the state of Washington. Mr. Sterling swallows hard. He cannot look at Patricia. He stares intensely at the mahogany table. When a voluntary relinquishment is finalized and a permanent adoption is granted, he stammers, his voice completely stripped of its previous arrogance. All legal familial ties are permanently and irrevocably severed. The biological parents become legal strangers to the child. Exactly. I say, my voice ringing with total, absolute finality. When you signed that document 20 years ago, Patricia, you did not just give up custody. You legally erased yourself from my existence. In the eyes of the law, you are not my mother. Richard is not my father. You have absolutely no legal relationship to me whatsoever. Furthermore, because you legally severed your ties to me, you simultaneously severed your standing as extended family to Uncle Henry's household. Patricia stares at me, her mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. You are not family, Patricia. I continue driving the final nail into the coffin of her grand delusion. You are an absolute legal stranger. You have the exact same legal standing in this room as a random person walking off the street. You cannot contest the primary will because you are not a recognized relative. You cannot demand family provisions because you legally terminated your family status to save a few bucks on child support. But the addendum, Patricia shrieks, pointing frantically at the blue folder. Henry signed the addendum. He specifically named me. He promised me 50% to make amends for the division. It does not matter if we are legally estranged. He named me in a new contract. She is desperately clinging to her forged document, believing it is her final impenetrable shield. She refuses to accept that her legal strategy is entirely dismantled. She thinks the signature on that piece of paper will somehow override 20 years of documented abandonment and legal severance. She believes her expensive attorney can simply force the estate executor to honor the addendum regardless of her lack of standing. I look down at my polished red binder and I feel a surge of intense, highly controlled adrenaline rush through my veins. The trap has been perfectly set. Patricia has publicly staked her entire financial future, her reputation, and her remaining shred of dignity on a single piece of paper she brought into this room. She has demanded that the addendum be recognized as the ultimate truth. She has pushed her lawyer to the absolute brink. She has completely set the stage for her own total annihilation. I take a deep breath, centering my emotions. I am about to tear that forged addendum to shreds and watch her entire world collapse into absolute terrifying ruin. I keep my eyes locked entirely on Mr. Sterling. Patricia is still ranting about her rights, but her voice is just meaningless background noise now. I slide my hand into the final tab of my red binder. This tab does not hold bank statements or property deeds. It holds something far more powerful. It holds medical records. I pull out a thick stack of papers bearing the official heavily embossed letterhead of Swedish Medical Center. I place them on the mahogany table and push them directly toward the attorney. Let us examine this legally binding addendum of yours, Mr. Sterling. I say, my voice slicing cleanly through Patricia's hysterical rambling. I want you to look very closely at the date your client claims Uncle Henry signed that document. I want you to read the exact date aloud for every single person in this room to hear. Mr. Sterling hesitates. The arrogant bluster that he marched into the boardroom with has completely evaporated. He looks down at the blue legal jacket containing the addendum. He swallows hard, his Adam's apple bobbing visibly above his expensive silk tie. October 14th, 2025. He states, his voice completely devoid of its former booming confidence. October 14th, I repeat, letting this specific date hang heavily in the cold air of the corporate boardroom. That is a very specific date. Patricia claims that on October 14th, Uncle Henry sat down with her, expressed his deepest regrets about our family division, and signed away $22.5 million. She claims he was completely lucid, completely aware, and fully capable of executing a binding legal contract. Patricia crosses her arms over her chest and lifts her chin, projecting a fragile, defiant pride. Yes, he was. She snaps, her voice shrill and trembling with desperate anger. He knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted to make things right. He wanted to compensate us for everything we endured. I looked directly back at the high-priced attorney, completely ignoring her desperate outbursts. Mr. Sterling, I highly recommend you open the medical file I just handed you. I say, maintaining my absolute clinical calm. Turn directly to page 47. You will find the attending physician's official medical notes from October 14th. Mr. Sterling reaches out with a shaking hand. He opens the medical file. He turns the heavy white pages until he reaches the one I specified. I watch his eyes actively scan the dense medical terminology. I watch the exact moment his highly educated brain processes the devastating reality of what he is reading. The healthy color instantly drains from his face, leaving him looking pale and utterly sickly. A visible tremor starts in his fingers, making the crisp hospital paper shake loudly in the painfully quiet room. For the benefit of everyone else in this room, I say, my voice perfectly steady and unwavering, allow me to summarize exactly what those medical records comprehensively prove. On October 12th, exactly 2 days before this supposed addendum was signed, Uncle Henry suffered a massive pulmonary embolism. He was rushed directly to the intensive care unit at Swedish Medical Center by emergency transport. His medical condition was highly critical. In order to stabilize his failing vital organs, the trauma medical team placed him in a medically induced coma. He was heavily sedated and fully intubated to sustain his breathing. He remained in that deep unconscious state, entirely unresponsive to any external stimuli for 8 consecutive days. The silence in the boardroom becomes absolutely suffocating. I can hear the sharp, ragged intake of breath from Jessica. I can hear the heavy, disgusted sigh from Marcus, who is standing frozen in the corner, watching his wife and mother-in-law transform into absolute criminals before his very eyes. Uncle Henry was in a medically induced coma on October 14th. Patricia say, turning my gaze back to the woman who threw me away in the freezing rain 20 years ago. He was physically incapable of holding a pen. He was physically incapable of speaking a single word. He was medically and physically incapable of drafting, signing, or acknowledging any legal document whatsoever. The signature on your magical addendum is not a final act of beautiful family reconciliation. It is an absolute, blatant, poorly executed forgery. Patricia opens her mouth, but absolutely no sound comes out. She looks exactly like she has been physically struck by a heavy object. Her elaborate, carefully constructed web of lies has just crashed headfirst into an impenetrable concrete wall of undeniable medical evidence. She glances desperately at Mr. Sterling, fully expecting her highly paid, expensive lawyer to somehow magically fix this impossible nightmare situation. But Mr. Sterling is not looking at her at all. He is staring at the printed medical records in sheer, absolute, unadulterated terror. He is a man who makes a very lucrative living navigating the complex rules of probate law and estate management. He knows exactly what happens to an attorney who knowingly submits a forged document to a federal judge. Mr. Sterling, I continue, my voice dropping to a low, incredibly dangerous register. I am a senior financial accountant. I work seamlessly with massive corporate portfolios and elite legal teams every single day of my life. I know exactly how the rigorous legal system deals with attempted estate fraud. Submitting that forged addendum to a probate court is not just a minor clerical error. It is a severe Class B felony. It is a direct criminal attempt to actively extort millions of dollars from a legal estate using completely fabricated evidence. Mr. Sterling drops the medical file onto the mahogany table as if the paper is literally burning his hands. He is breathing rapidly, his chest heaving under his perfectly tailored suit. He realizes with horrifying crystal clarity that Patricia deliberately lied to him. She walked into his pristine law office, spun a tragic, dramatic story of painful family estrangement, handed him a forged piece of paper, and promised him a massive percentage of $22 million. She selfishly used his professional credibility to legitimize her desperate criminal scheme. She turned an officer of the court into an unwitting accomplice to felony fraud. I have already taken the liberty of drafting a formal detailed complaint to the Washington State Bar Association, I say, tapping a sleek white envelope resting prominently on top of my red binder. This legal complaint details the exact timeline of events. It includes the forged addendum, the medical records definitively proving my uncle's coma, and a comprehensive forensic financial report detailing Patricia's massive unsecured debt and her absolutely clear motive for committing major estate fraud. I have the estate executor sitting right next to me as a direct professional witness to this entire illegal proceeding. I lean forward slightly, locking my eyes firmly with the terrified lawyer. If you attempt to file that addendum, Mr. Sterling, I will submit this formal complaint to the ethics board before you even make it back to your fancy office. I will personally ensure that your legal license is permanently revoked. I will see to it that you face severe criminal conspiracy charges right alongside your desperate client. You will not just lose your lucrative career today, you will absolutely lose your freedom. The complete total breakdown of an arrogant, powerful man is a spectacular and fascinating thing to witness. Mr. Sterling practically collapses into himself. His arrogant, imposing bluster is completely gone, replaced entirely by raw, unfiltered animal panic. He looks at Patricia with an expression of pure, absolute, visceral loathing. "You lied to me," he hisses, his voice trembling with furious, overwhelming terror. "You sat in my office, and you swore on your absolute life that Henry signed this document right in front of you. You told me he was fully awake and entirely lucid. You set me up, you crazy woman. You used me to commit a federal felony." Patricia reaches out, her hands shaking violently. "No, Victor, please." She begs, her voice cracking into a pathetic, desperate whine. "We can still fix this minor detail. We can say the date was simply a mistake. We can easily say it was signed earlier in the week. Please do not leave us here. I will pay you double your retainer. I promise you will get all your money." Mr. Sterling aggressively snatches his expensive briefcase from the table. He is moving so incredibly fast, he's practically tripping over his own expensive leather shoes. He shoves his legal pads and his pens into the leather bag with frantic, jerky, unpredictable motions. "Do not ever contact me again, Patricia." He shouts loud enough for every single person in the room to hear clearly. "You are completely insane. You are a bankrupt, delusional fraud, and I will absolutely not let you drag me down to prison with you. I am officially withdrawing as your legal counsel effective immediately. I have absolutely nothing to do with this fraudulent document or this ridiculous criminal conspiracy." He snaps his briefcase shut with a loud, sharp click that echoes like a gavel striking a judge's block. He turns back to me, his face shining with a thick layer of cold sweat. "Miss Davis," he says, his voice shaking with desperate, newly found respect. "I assure you, I had absolutely no prior knowledge of this blatant forgery. I was deliberately and maliciously misled by my client. I will not be filing any claims against this estate whatsoever. I want absolutely no part of this mess." I nod slowly, accepting his pathetic, terrified surrender. "Then I highly suggest you leave this building, Mr. Sterling," I say quietly, before the local police are called to formally investigate this attempted extortion. Mr. Sterling does not need to be told twice. He literally turns his body and runs. The high-priced, arrogant lawyer who boldly stormed into this boardroom, demanding millions of dollars, aggressively sprints toward the heavy glass doors like his very life depends on it. He violently shoves the door open and rushes out into the carpeted hallway, not even looking back once. The heavy door swings shut behind him, firmly sealing his absolute permanent departure. The silence that rapidly falls over the boardroom now is utterly complete and profoundly devastating. The great legal threat, the shark in the tailored suit, the man Patricia firmly thought would aggressively bully me into handing over her salvation, has abandoned her in absolute horror. Her grand master plan is entirely destroyed. Her forged document is completely worthless. Her leverage is completely gone forever. Patricia is left standing completely alone at the edge of the mahogany table. Her hands are utterly empty. Her massive expected fortune has vanished like cheap smoke in the wind. The flawless facade she spent 20 long years meticulously building, the illusion of immense wealth and superiority, has been utterly obliterated by the quiet, 7-year-old girl she threw away in the cold rain. And there is nothing left for her but the crushing ruin of her own making. Jessica is weeping loudly into her hands, completely overwhelmed by the utter destruction of her supposed massive inheritance. Richard is sitting completely frozen, unable to look at me, unable to look at his wife. He is a pathetic coward who realizes his entire world is actively crumbling into dust. Marcus, the brilliant architect, takes a deep, shaky breath. The structural integrity of the people he trusted is entirely compromised. He sees Patricia standing there, a desperate fraud who actively tried to rob a dying man while he lay in a coma. He sees the absolute magnitude of the crimes she was willing to commit just to maintain a false appearance. He sees the absolute horror of the situation she dragged him into. The room remains incredibly quiet. I sit calmly in my chair, securing the medical records safely back into my red binder. The forensic accounting report did exactly what it was designed to do. It exposed the absolute truth and terrified the corrupt elements entirely out of the room. Patricia has no lawyer. She has no valid claim. She has absolutely no power left in this universe. She thought she could rewrite reality to suit her selfish needs, but the undeniable facts completely shattered her delusions. The truth always wins in the end, and today it won flawlessly. The heavy glass door of the corporate boardroom swings shut with a soft, definitive click, completely sealing the agonizing silence left in the wake of the fleeing lawyer. Mr. Sterling ran out of this room like a man escaping a burning building, leaving behind a profound and absolute vacuum. Patricia is slumped in her chair, her face a portrait of utter devastation and disbelief. The grand illusion she spent 20 years meticulously constructing has been entirely obliterated in a matter of minutes. She has no legal representation left. She has no valid claim to Uncle Henry's massive estate. She is drowning in nearly $3 million of toxic debt, and her forged addendum is nothing more than a piece of criminal evidence sitting uselessly on the mahogany table. Jessica is openly weeping now, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with violent, pathetic sobs. She is mourning the loss of the $22 million she thought she was going to inherit, but more importantly, she's mourning the loss of her entire fabricated identity. Richard remains completely paralyzed, staring blankly at his own hands, entirely incapable of protecting his family from the catastrophic consequences of their own greed. But the most dangerous energy in the room is not radiating from my broken biological family. It is radiating from Marcus. The brilliant, successful architect is standing near the floor to ceiling windows perfectly still. His expensive tailored suit seems to hang heavier on his broad shoulders. He has just discovered that his wife and his mother-in-law systematically lied to him for years. He has just realized that the massive trust fund he was dutifully paying taxes on was a complete phantom, a fraudulent illusion designed to mask their reckless spending and predatory loans. He has watched the woman he married viciously attack me and expose her true cruel nature. The financial betrayal is staggering, but as I look at Marcus, I know that the personal betrayal is about to become infinitely worse. I close the section of my red binder containing the forensic medical records and the evidence of Patricia's attempted wire fraud. I place my hands flat against the cool leather cover. I take a deep, slow breath, filling my lungs with the recycled air of the boardroom. My primary legal duty as the executor of Uncle Henry's silent wealth portfolio is officially complete. The estate is completely secure from their greedy grasp, but I have one final personal duty to fulfill. Uncle Henry left specific, explicit instructions regarding Marcus, and it is time to execute them. Marcus. I say, my voice calm and perfectly steady, easily piercing the sound of Jessica's ragged sobbing. There is one final piece of business we need to address before we leave this room today. Marcus slowly turns his head away from the window. His dark eyes lock onto mine, and I can see the profound exhaustion and raw devastation swirling within them. He looks at me not with anger, but with the desperate, weary plea of a man who just wants the absolute truth, no matter how much it destroys him. He nods once, a sharp, definitive gesture, signaling his readiness to hear whatever I have left to say. Uncle Henry was a man who observed everything. I begin keeping my tone gentle but entirely unyielding. He despised Patricia and Richard for what they did to me. He held absolutely zero respect for Jessica because he saw how she willingly adopted her mother's toxic entitlement. But Uncle Henry actually respected you, Marcus. He followed your architectural career. He read the articles published about your commercial designs. He admired the fact that you were a self-made man who built your success on genuine talent and rigorous hard work. Marcus blinks, clearly surprised by this revelation. He shifts his weight, taking a small step toward the table. Uncle Henry also knew exactly how my biological family operates. I continue, my eyes darting briefly toward Patricia, who is staring at me with hollow, terrified exhaustion. He knew that Patricia only values people based on what she can extract from them. He knew that your lucrative career and your pristine public reputation were the only things keeping this crumbling family financially afloat. He suspected that they were hiding their true nature from you, and a few months before his death, he accidentally obtained the undeniable proof. I reach into the inner pocket of my suit jacket and pull out my encrypted digital phone. I unlock the screen and open a secure audio file app. Uncle Henry still had a landline at his modest house. I explain, setting the phone down on the polished mahogany table directly between myself and Marcus. About 8 months ago, Patricia called him. She was attempting to manipulate him into paying for a massive renovation on the house she was secretly drowning in debt over. Uncle Henry refused and simply let the call go to his answering machine. Patricia left a voicemail demanding money, but when she finished her rant, she failed to properly disconnect the call on her cell phone. The answering machine continued to record for another 4 minutes, capturing a private conversation between Patricia and Jessica inside their kitchen. Jessica suddenly stops crying. She drops her hands from her face, her mascara-smeared eyes widening in sheer absolute panic. She knows exactly what conversation I am talking about. "Mom?" She whispers, her voice shaking with sudden, intense terror. "Mom, what did you say on that recording?" Patricia does not answer. She is completely frozen, staring at the phone on the table, as if it is a live explosive device about to detonate. "Uncle Henry saved this audio file specifically for you, Marcus," I say, my voice dropping to a serious, solemn register. "He instructed me to play it for you today because he firmly believed that no honorable man should be legally bound to a family that harbors such profound, deeply rooted hatred toward him. You deserve to hear exactly how your wife and your mother-in-law speak about you behind closed doors." I press the play button on the screen and turn the volume all the way up. The audio begins with the sharp electronic beep of an answering machine. Then Patricia's voice fills the quiet boardroom, loud and completely unfiltered. She is ranting about Uncle Henry, calling him a selfish, stubborn old fool. There is a brief pause, followed by the unmistakable sound of a phone being tossed onto a hard granite countertop, but the connection remains entirely open. Then the true conversation begins. Patricia's voice echoes through the room, dripping with an ugly, elitist venom that makes my stomach turn. "I cannot believe we have to keep pretending to like that man," Patricia says, her recorded voice sounding muffled but undeniably clear. "And I cannot believe I have to go to another country club dinner with Marcus tonight. I swear, Jessica, I can barely stand looking at him sitting at our table, acting like he actually belongs in our circle." Jessica's recorded voice replies entirely casual and completely unbothered. "I know, Mom, but you just have to deal with it. His firm just landed that massive state contract. We need his income." Patricia's next words are like a physical knife slashing through the tension in the boardroom. She uses a series of racially charged derogatory terms to describe Marcus. She explicitly mocks his background, his heritage, and his family. She speaks with a vile, sickening prejudice that strips away any illusion of sophisticated wealth and reveals the ugly, rotting core of her character. She states clearly that Marcus is nothing more than a useful financial tool to her. She says that his kind are only good for funding the lifestyle that people of her pedigree actually deserve. And the most devastating part of the entire recording is not Patricia's racist venom, it is Jessica's response. Jessica does not defend her husband. She does not express outrage or disgust at her mother's vile bigotry. Instead, Jessica's recorded voice simply laughs, a light, airy, cruel sound. "I know, Mom," she says on the tape. "He's so utterly clueless about how this world actually works. But as long as he keeps depositing those huge checks and paying the taxes on my trust fund, we just have to tolerate his background. Just smile and drink your wine tonight." The recording ends with a sharp click as the voicemail finally times out. The silence that instantly crashes down on the boardroom is heavier and more suffocating than anything I have ever experienced. It is a thick, oppressive silence filled with the absolute destruction of a marriage. I look at Marcus. He is standing completely motionless, his dark eyes fixed on the blank screen of my phone. His chest is barely moving. The brilliant architect, the man who spent years loving, supporting, and funding this family, has just heard his own wife casually agree with a horrific racist diatribe against him. He has just heard that his entire marriage was viewed as nothing more than a highly profitable financial transaction by a family of bigoted, desperate frauds. Patricia shrinks into her chair, her face a mask of complete, agonizing terror. She knows there is absolutely no excuse, no possible context that can explain away the vile words she just heard herself speak. Jessica is trembling violently, her hands hovering near her mouth, unable to look at the man she married. Marcus slowly raises his head. He does not yell. He does not scream or throw a violent tantrum like the woman sitting across from him. His anger is cold, precise, and absolutely terrifying. He walks slowly toward the mahogany table, his footsteps echoing loudly against the polished wood floor. He stops directly across from Jessica and looks down at her. Jessica reaches out a shaking hand, desperately trying to grasp his arm. "Marcus, baby, please," she whimpers, tears streaming down her ruined face. "It was just Mom talking. She was just stressed. You know she says crazy things when she is stressed. I did not mean what I said. I was just trying to calm her down. I love you, Marcus. You know I love you." Marcus looks at her outstretched hand with an expression of profound, complete revulsion. "Do not ever attempt to touch me again," he says, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that commands the absolute attention of the entire room. He looks at Patricia, and the pure, unadulterated disgust radiating from his eyes makes the older woman physically flinch. "You sit at my dining table. Every Sunday," Patricia Marcus says, his voice tight with heavily controlled fury. "You drink the expensive wine I purchase. You live in a house funded by the predatory loans I unknowingly helped you secure. You smile at my face and call me family while harboring that kind of sickening, vile hatred in your heart. You are not just a financial fraud, Patricia. You are a disgusting, hateful, racist coward." Patricia opens her mouth to speak, to formulate some pathetic excuse, but Marcus instantly raises a single finger, silencing her completely. "Do not speak to me," he commands. "Do not ever speak a single word to me for the rest of your miserable life. You are absolutely nothing to me." Marcus turns his furious, devastating gaze back to Jessica. The golden child shrinks under the intense weight of his absolute judgment. "You knew exactly who she was," Jessica Marcus says quietly, shaking his head in profound disbelief. "You sat there in your kitchen and you laughed while your mother degraded my humanity, my heritage, and my character. You actively hid her vile bigotry from me because you needed my bank account to fund your pathetic, imaginary trust fund. You allowed her to disrespect the father of your children because you cared more about maintaining a fake country club status than you cared about your own husband." Jessica is sobbing hysterically now, shaking her head back and forth. "No, Marcus, please do not do this. We have a family. We have our children. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. I am so sorry." "You cannot fix a foundation built entirely on fraudulent, toxic lies," Marcus states, his voice ringing with absolute chilling finality. "I spent years trying to understand why you were always so incredibly defensive whenever I asked about your finances. I spent years trying to understand the strange, condescending comments your mother always made about my background. Now the entire structure makes perfect sense. You're exactly like her, Jessica. You are hollow, greedy, and completely devoid of any moral integrity." Marcus takes a slow, deliberate breath. He reaches down to his left hand and grips the thick gold wedding band resting on his ring finger. The simple metal band suddenly seems to represent a heavy, suffocating chain. I watch as Marcus smoothly and decisively pulls the gold ring off his finger. He holds it for a fraction of a second, staring at the polished metal that symbolized a decade of his life, completely wasted on a lie. Then, with a sharp, aggressive motion, he slams the heavy gold ring directly onto the center of the mahogany table. The loud metallic crack of the ring hitting the wood echoes violently through the glass boardroom, severing their marriage with absolute undeniable permanence. "I am filing for divorce this afternoon," Marcus announces, staring directly into Jessica's panicked, weeping eyes. "And I am immediately filing for full and absolute legal custody of our children. I will absolutely not allow my kids to be raised around the toxic, bigoted poison that infects this family. I will not let you or your mother anywhere near them." Jessica lets out a loud, devastated wail, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony as she watches her entire world collapse into absolute ruin. She reaches frantically for the ring resting on the table, but Marcus steps back, removing himself entirely from her reach. He turns toward me, and for the first time since the will reading began, his expression softens into one of genuine, profound respect. He looks at me, the woman his wife called garbage, the woman his mother-in-law threw into a freezing storm, and he nods slowly. "Thank you, Evelyn," Marcus says, his voice filled with sincere, heavy gratitude. "Thank you for not protecting their lies. Thank you for showing me the absolute truth so I could finally break free from this nightmare. Uncle Henry was right about you. You are an incredibly honorable woman." I nod back respectfully, acknowledging his pain and his newfound clarity. "You deserve a family that actually values you, Marcus," I say quietly. "I am truly sorry you had to endure their cruelty for so long." Marcus straightens his suit jacket, regaining his powerful, dignified posture. He does not look at Jessica or Patricia again. They are completely erased from his vision, entirely irrelevant to his future. He turns his back on the weeping women and the paralyzed, cowardly father and walks with long, confident strides toward the heavy glass door of the boardroom. He pushes the door open and steps out into the hallway, leaving his gold ring resting on the table as the ultimate symbol of his departure. The door clicks shut, leaving Patricia, Jessica, and Richard entirely alone in their devastating, spectacular ruin. Their lawyer has fled in absolute horror. Their millions of dollars are securely locked away in a trust they cannot touch. Their predatory loans are inevitably going to destroy their fake affluent lifestyle. And now the only honorable man who ever tried to support them has walked away, taking the children and exposing their vile bigotry to the harsh light of day. I sit quietly at the head of the table, my hands resting calmly on my red binder. The immense, satisfying peace of pure justice fills the room. I did not have to scream or yell or throw a tantrum. I simply delivered the undeniable facts and let their own toxic actions tear their world completely apart. The little girl shivering in the dark driveway is gone forever, replaced by a woman who holds the ultimate, unassailable power of the truth. The heavy glass door clicks shut behind Marcus, and the sound echoes like a final judge striking a gavel in the empty boardroom. The absolute silence that follows is thick and suffocating. The polished, united front that Patricia and Richard marched into this building with has been completely annihilated. Their expensive lawyer ran away in absolute terror to save his own license. Their wealthy son-in-law walked out the door, taking his high income, his pristine reputation, and their grandchildren with him. Their forged golden ticket to $22 million is lying utterly useless on the mahogany table. They are completely exposed. I sit perfectly still at the head of the table, my hands resting calmly on the red binder. I watch the precise moment the shock wears off, and the absolute reality of their freefall sets in. Patricia is staring at the closed glass door, her chest heaving, her mouth opening and closing silently. She is trying to process how her brilliant master plan collapsed so violently. But it is Richard who breaks the silence. Richard, the man who spent his entire life shrinking into the background, the man who silently agreed to throw his own 7-year-old daughter into a freezing rainstorm just to avoid an argument with his wife, finally snaps. He stands up from his leather chair, and the movement is so sudden and jerky that the heavy chair tips backward and crashes onto the floor. The loud thud makes Patricia jump. "You stupid, arrogant woman!" Richard screams, his voice tearing through the quiet room with a raw, raspy fury I have never heard from him before. He points a trembling finger directly at Patricia's face. You just cost us absolutely everything. Every single thing is gone because you could not stop grasping for more. Patricia whips her head around to look at him, her eyes wide with fresh shock. She is so accustomed to his total submission that his sudden rage momentarily paralyzes her. "Richard, do not you dare raise your voice to me." She spits back her tone, dripping with her usual toxic condescension. "I was trying to save this family. I was trying to get what Henry owed us. Us. Richard bellows, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. He steps toward her, his fists clenched so tightly, his knuckles are completely white. "Henry did not owe us a single dime. You alienated him. You drove him away with your endless, insatiable greed. And then you dragged me into this insane criminal conspiracy to forge a legal document. You promised me Victor Sterling could bully his way through this probate process. You promised me we would walk out of here with enough cash to bury our nightmare. Instead, you just handed my son-in-law the exact proof he needed to walk away, and you gave your daughter the very weapon she needs to put us in federal prison." He gestures wildly toward me, acknowledging my absolute control over their fate, without even looking me in the eyes. I watch them tear each other to shreds with clinical fascination. Dr. Hayes, my therapist, always told me that toxic relationships eventually consume themselves when the external fuel runs out. Their fuel was stolen money and false prestige, and now the tank is completely empty. "We are millions of dollars in debt," Patricia Richards screams, spit flying from his lips. "We are carrying nearly $3 million in toxic high-yield debt because you absolutely refuse to look like anything less than royalty at that pathetic country club. You drained Jessica's childhood accounts. You took out 3 separate secret mortgages on a house that was already underwater. You maxed out credit cards in my name to buy designer clothes you wore exactly once. It was for our image," Patricia screeches back, her voice shrill and desperate. "In our world, you have to project wealth to maintain status. If you had just been a better provider, Richard, if you had actually been a successful man instead of a weak, pathetic failure, I would not have had to manage our finances so creatively. I did what I had to do to secure Jessica's future with Marcus. And look how perfectly that turned out." Richard mocks, letting out a harsh, hysterical laugh that borders on genuine madness. Marcus just walked out that door. He took off his wedding ring and left it on this table. He is filing for full custody because you could not keep your racist, bigoted mouth shut on a recorded line. You destroyed your own daughter's marriage to satisfy your endless vanity. And you destroyed us. Richard grabs the edge of the mahogany table, leaning his weight on it, as if his legs can no longer support the crushing reality of his life. He looks at Patricia with an expression of pure, absolute loathing. The cowardice that defined him for 20 years has mutated into a vicious, desperate blame. "The bank called 2 days ago," Patricia Richards states, his voice dropping to a terrifying deadpan whisper. "2 days ago, while you were busy plotting how to steal millions from a man in a coma, the primary lender officially initiated foreclosure proceedings on our house. The notice of default was filed with the county. The sheriff is going to come and put a padlock on that front door in a matter of weeks. We have absolutely zero liquid cash. We have zero assets. We cannot even afford to pay a lawyer to defend us against the felony fraud charges Evelyn is about to file." Patricia violently shakes her head, her hands clamping over her ears like a petulant toddler trying to block out a loud noise. "Stop it," she shrieks. "Stop saying these things. We will find a way. We always find a way. I will call my friends. I will call the club president. They will float us alone until we can figure this out. We are the Davis family. We do not lose our home to a bank. Your friends secretly hate you," Richard screams, slapping the table again. "They tolerate you because you buy the most expensive wine at the charity auctions using money you stole from your own child. The minute word gets out that we are completely bankrupt and that you attempted to commit felony wire fraud against a dying man, those society friends will cross the street to avoid walking on the same sidewalk as you. You have absolutely no one left, Patricia. No friends, no son-in-law, no lawyer, and no money." I sit back in my chair, watching the grand, magnificent collapse of the villain who destroyed my childhood. Patricia is hyperventilating now. The pristine, wealthy facade she wore, like impenetrable armor, has completely disintegrated, leaving behind a terrified, desperate, aging woman who realizes she is about to be cast out into the exact same cold, unforgiving world she once banished me to. The poetic justice is incredibly profound. 20 years ago, she stood on a warm, dry porch and looked at a freezing, crying 7-year-old girl. She told me I was a financial burden and threw me away like actual garbage. She pointed me toward the dark, stormy driveway and told me to figure it out myself. Now the universe is reflecting her exact cruelty right back at her. The bank is coming for her house. Her debts are suffocating her. She's about to be thrown out into the cold, and there is absolutely no one coming to save her. "You did this to us," Patricia hisses suddenly, turning her frantic, manic eyes toward me. She cannot accept her own accountability, so she reverts to her default programming. She targets the designated scapegoat. "You planned this, Evelyn. You sat there for 5 years, managing Henry's money, plotting how to destroy my life. You manipulated those medical records. You set us up to look like fools." I do not flinch. I do not defend myself against her ridiculous, unhinged accusations. I look at her with the cold, detached pity one might reserve for a dying insect. "I did not take out 3 secret mortgages, Patricia," I say, my voice perfectly calm, cutting through the chaotic echo of her screaming. "I did not drain Jessica's childhood trust fund. I did not log onto a computer in Southeast Portland and attempt to initiate a fraudulent wire transfer while Uncle Henry was fighting for his life in a medically induced coma. I did not force you to walk into a lawyer's office and lie about an addendum. You built this prison entirely by yourself, brick by greedy brick. I simply handed you the keys and let you lock yourself inside." Richard lets out another broken, hollow laugh. He turns his back on his wife and stares out the massive glass windows at the Seattle skyline. The rain is starting to fall again, streaking against the thick glass, mirroring the storm that defined the darkest night of my life. But this time, I am securely inside the fortress, and they are the ones standing out in the cold. "We are going to lose everything," Richard whispers to the glass, his voice carrying a haunting finality. "The house, the cars, the club memberships, everything. We are going to be completely ruined." "We are not ruined," Patricia insists, grabbing his shoulder forcefully. "Do not say that, Richard. We will file for bankruptcy protection. We will hide the remaining assets. I still have my jewelry. I still have the offshore accounts we set up. We can liquidate them before the bank audits everything." "There are no offshore accounts, Patricia." I interrupt, casually opening my red binder one last time. As part of my comprehensive forensic audit, I tracked every single financial vehicle you ever attempted to establish. The accounts in the Cayman Islands were flagged for suspicious activity 3 years ago, due to your complete inability to maintain proper tax documentation. The federal authorities froze those assets pending a full investigation. You have absolutely nothing hidden that the government does not already know about. Patricia physically stumbles backward, as if I have just shot her in the chest. Her breathing becomes a series of sharp, painful gasps. The very last shred of her delusional safety net has just been incinerated. She looks around the empty boardroom, her eyes darting frantically from the closed door to the windows to the useless forged addendum sitting on the table. She is a cornered animal, realizing there is absolutely no escape route left. "You are a monster," Patricia whispers, staring at me with a look of pure, unfiltered dread. "You are a cold, calculating monster. Henry created a monster." I gently close my red binder and smooth my hands over the leather cover. "No, Patricia," I say softly, projecting my voice so it reaches every corner of the silent room. "Uncle Henry created a survivor. You created the monster. You let your greed and your absolute lack of basic human empathy turn you into a creature willing to sacrifice your own children for a country club membership. You threw me away because I was an inconvenience to your vanity. You stole from Jessica to fund your illusions. You drove your husband into massive, crushing debt. You are the only monster in this room, and right now you are finally starving to death." Richard slowly turns away from the window. He looks old and utterly defeated. He does not even attempt to argue with me. He knows every single word I have spoken is the absolute, undeniable truth. He walks heavily toward the boardroom door, completely ignoring Patricia, who is still hyperventilating near the table. "Where are you going?" Patricia screams, panic lacing every syllable. "Richard, do not leave me here. We have to figure out a plan. We have to call another lawyer. We have to fight this." Richard pauses with his hand resting on the heavy metal door handle. He looks back at the woman he followed blindly for 3 decades. "There is no plan left, Patricia. he says, his voice utterly devoid of hope or affection. The bank is taking the house. Marcus is taking the grandchildren. Evelyn has the entire estate securely locked down. The police are probably going to arrest us for fraud before the week is over. I am going to walk out to my car and figure out where I am going to sleep tonight, because I am absolutely not going back to that house with you. He pushes the heavy glass door open and walks out into the hallway, letting the door click shut behind him. He leaves Patricia completely alone in the center of the boardroom. The golden child Jessica has already fled. The wealthy son-in-law has severed his ties completely. The powerful attorney has run for his life. And now her submissive, obedient husband has abandoned her to face the absolute collapse of her empire alone. I sit quietly at the head of the table, observing the magnificent total destruction of the woman who ruined my childhood. The justice is absolutely flawless. She wanted to erase me from this family to secure her wealth. Instead, I became the absolute sole guardian of that wealth, and she erased herself entirely from any meaningful existence. The collapse of her facade is complete. The truth has been fully illuminated. And the cold, empty reality she now faces is the exact destiny she earned for herself. The heavy mahogany door clicks shut behind Richard, sealing Patricia in a tomb of her own making. The vast corporate boardroom suddenly feels incredibly small. The air is thick and stagnant. Patricia stands frozen near the edge of the table, perfectly manicured hands trembling violently as they grip the polished wood. Her eyes are wide and completely vacant. She has lost her husband, her daughter, her son-in-law, her fake inheritance, and her entire social standing in the span of an hour. But a true narcissist never fully comprehends total defeat until their physical sanctuary is breached. "I will just go home," she whispers, her voice cracking under the weight of her denial. "I will lock the doors. You can keep this miserable money, Evelyn. I do not care anymore. The bank has to give me 90 days before they can legally force me out. I know my rights. I will stay in my house and I will figure this out. I will call the country club board. I will get a bridge loan. You have not one." I sit perfectly still at the head of the long table. My hands are resting calmly on the thick red binder that holds the absolute reality of her financial destruction. I look at her and I feel a profound sense of closure washing over my entire body. The scared little 7-year-old girl who cried in the freezing rain is completely gone. In her place is a 27-year-old senior financial accountant who understands exactly how to wield the power of silent wealth. He really should have paid more attention to the inventory of assets, Attorney Mitchell read earlier. "Patricia." I say, my voice, calm, steady, and carrying effortlessly across the quiet room. "You heard the grand total of $45 million, but you were far too consumed by your own greed to listen to how that money was actually structured." Patricia squints at me, her breathing ragged. "What are you talking about?" she snaps defensively. I unlock the metal rings of my red binder one final time. The sharp metallic snap echoes like a gavel striking a block. I turn to the very last section. Uncle Henry was a brilliant man. I continue pulling out a pristine stack of legal documents printed on heavy archival paper. He did not just leave cash sitting idle in checking accounts. He built an intricate network of private holding companies and limited liability corporations. He utilized these corporate entities to acquire distressed properties and purchase toxic debt from major financial institutions for pennies on the dollar. Patricia stares at me, her brow furrowed in complete confusion. She has never understood complex finance. She only understood how to spend money she never earned. 2 days ago, when your primary lender officially initiated foreclosure proceedings on your suburban house, they immediately packaged your toxic defaulted mortgages and sold them off to mitigate their losses. I explain, speaking slowly, so every single devastating syllable lands exactly where it belongs. The bank wanted absolutely nothing to do with your $3.2 million of unsecured reckless debt. They put your defaulted loans on the private market. I slide the first document across the mahogany table. It stops directly in front of Patricia's trembling hands. It is an official transfer of deed and a formal purchase agreement. A private commercial real estate firm named Apex Holdings, LLC, purchased your debt in its entirety yesterday morning, I state, watching her eyes drop to the paper. They bought the primary mortgage, the second mortgage, and the heavily defaulted home equity line of credit. Apex Holdings legally paid off the bank. The bank no longer has any claim to your property. Patricia lets out a sharp, breathless laugh. Her mind is desperately trying to spin this into a victory. So the bank does not own the house, she says, a frantic spark of hope lighting up her terrified eyes. Some faceless corporation bought it. That means the foreclosure process has to start all over again. I have months. I have time to hire a lawyer and fight this fake holding company. I shake my head slowly, letting a cold, completely detached smile touch my lips. You do not have months, Patricia, and you absolutely do not have time to fight them. I pull the final document from my binder. It is a single crisp sheet of paper bearing my official corporate signature and a stark red legal seal. Apex Holdings LLC is not a faceless corporation, I say, my voice dropping to a low, deeply resonant tone. Apex Holdings is the primary commercial real estate arm of Uncle Henry's silent wealth portfolio. It is the exact same holding company that manages the majority of his $45 million estate. And as of this morning, when the probate court officially recognized me as the sole legal beneficiary and executor, I became the absolute sole owner and controlling director of Apex Holdings. Patricia stops breathing entirely. Her eyes widen to an impossible degree as the horrific reality of my words finally penetrates her thick wall of denial. I own the debt, Patricia, I say, leaning forward slightly, resting my forearms on the mahogany table. I own the mortgages. I own the deed to the property. I am officially, legally, and completely your landlord. No, she gasps, stumbling backward away from the table as if the documents are physically burning her. No, that is impossible. Henry could not do that. You cannot do that. That is my home. I decorated that house. I hosted charity galas in that dining room. You cannot take my home away from me. You gave your home away the moment you decided to fund a fake country club lifestyle with stolen money. I reply, my voice completely void of sympathy. You traded your security for the illusion of superiority. And now the illusion is over. I slide the final document across the table. It rests right beside the purchase agreement. It is an official, legally binding notice of eviction. Because Apex Holdings is a commercial entity, and because your property was acquired through a distressed corporate debt buyout, the standard residential eviction timelines absolutely do not apply to you. I explain, delivering the final crushing blow of systemic justice. You are not a standard tenant. You are a defaulting squatter occupying a commercially owned asset. That document right there is a formal 24-hour notice to vacate the premises. Patricia lets out a visceral, horrifying scream. It is a sound of pure, unadulterated agony tearing through her throat and echoing violently against the glass walls. She lunges forward, slamming her hands on the table and staring wildly at the eviction notice. 24 hours. She shrieks, tears streaming down her ruined face, mixing with her expensive smeared makeup. I cannot pack a 5-bedroom house in 24 hours. I have nowhere to go, Evelyn. Richard left me. Jessica will not answer my calls. I have $0 in my checking account. My credit cards are completely maxed out. You cannot throw me out into the street. I am your mother. You have to give me more time. You have to help me. She actually drops to her knees right there in the pristine corporate boardroom. The woman who tormented me, who treated me like absolute garbage, who strutted into this building wearing pearls and demanding $22 million, is now sobbing hysterically on the carpet, begging for mercy from the daughter she threw away. I stand up from my chair, buttoning my custom-tailored navy suit jacket. I look down at her pathetic weeping form, and I feel absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just the profound, immense peace of a massive debt finally being paid in full. 20 years ago, Patricia. I say, my voice steady and clear, filling the space above her weeping. I was a terrified 7-year-old girl wearing a thin cotton sweater. It was late November and the rain was freezing. You dragged me out of a warm car, dumped 2 plastic garbage bags containing everything I owned into the mud, and told me I was a financial burden. Patricia looks up at me, her face twisted in desperate, agonizing regret. Please. She begs, her hands reaching up toward the edge of the table. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please do not do this to me. I look you in the eyes while you stood under a large black umbrella, perfectly dry and comfortable. I continue, entirely ignoring her pleas. I begged you to let me back in the car. I promised to be good. I promised never to ask for anything ever again. And do you remember what you said to me, Patricia? She squeezes her eyes shut, shaking her head violently, refusing to speak the words that have come back to destroy her. You pointed up a dark, terrifying gravel driveway. I say, delivering her exact words back to her with chilling precision, and you told me to figure it out myself. I pick up my red binder, tucking it securely under my arm. You have exactly 24 hours to remove your personal belongings from my property, Patricia. If you are not gone by this time tomorrow, I will have the county sheriff physically remove you, and everything left inside that house will be thrown directly into a dumpster. I suggest you stop crying and start packing. You are going to have to figure it out yourself. I turn my back on her and walk confidently toward the heavy glass boardroom doors. 2 building security guards are already standing in the hallway, having been alerted by the estate executor to escort the hostile party off the premises. As I push through the doors, I can hear Patricia wailing behind me, a long drawn-out sound of total, absolute despair. I step into the elevator and press the button for the ground floor. The door slides shut, cutting off the sound of her crying entirely. The silence inside the elevator is beautiful. It is the sound of complete, absolute freedom. The heavy, suffocating weight I have carried since I was 7 years old is entirely gone. The monsters who haunted my past have been completely neutralized, stripped of their power, their wealth, and their fake dignity. Uncle Henry's brilliant silent wealth portfolio is secure, and the future is entirely mine to build. If you are watching this right now, and you have ever been treated like a burden by the people who are supposed to love and protect you, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You do not have to accept the narrative they created for you. You do not have to shrink yourself to make their toxic lives more comfortable. Setting firm, absolute boundaries is not an act of revenge. It is an act of fundamental survival. Love is not something you should ever have to beg for, and loyalty should never require you to sacrifice your own dignity. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is walk away quietly. Build your own beautiful reality, and let their own toxic actions catch up to them. The truth always demands a balance, and eventually every single debt comes due. Do not let anyone tell you that you are not enough. You are worthy of a safe, happy, and deeply fulfilling life entirely on your own terms. Thank you so much for staying with me through this entire journey. If my story resonated with you, if you felt that deep satisfaction of watching real justice finally being served, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps these stories reach the people who need to hear them the most. Drop a comment below and let me know exactly where you are watching from and what time it is there right now. I read every single comment, and I love connecting with you all. Remember, you hold the power to write your own ending. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next story. Exactly 2 days have passed since the absolute collapse of their fraudulent empire in the corporate boardroom. The fallout was incredibly swift and absolutely merciless. Because Apex Holdings is a commercial entity, and because my parents were legally classified as defaulting squatters, the county sheriff executed the commercial eviction notice with extreme prejudice. They were given exactly 10 minutes to vacate the foreclosed property before the heavy iron padlocks were permanently secured to their massive front doors. The beautiful fake life they built was completely boxed up in cheap plastic and tossed out. The weather in Seattle decides to perfectly mirror the deep poetic justice of this entire situation. A massive low-pressure system moves off the Pacific Ocean, bringing a torrential, freezing downpour that violently lashes the entire city. The rain falls in thick, heavy sheets, hammering relentlessly against the reinforced glass windows of Uncle Henry's massive wraparound estate. The wind howls through the ancient pine trees, bending them dangerously against the dark gray sky. I am sitting quietly in the exact same oversized plush leather chair where Uncle Henry placed me 20 years ago. The massive stone hearth in the center of the living room is roaring with a beautiful bright fire, casting a warm, comforting yellow glow across the expensive hardwood floors. The air inside the fortress smells of dry cedar wood and rich, expensive tea. I have a thick, soft fleece blanket wrapped securely around my shoulders. It is a profound, undeniable blanket of absolute security. The contrast between my perfect safety inside and the raging, violent storm outside is absolutely staggering. The silent wealth that Uncle Henry built brick by brick is now my impenetrable shield against the world. The quiet peace of the massive estate is suddenly broken by the soft melodic chime of the perimeter security system. The high-definition control tablet resting on the polished mahogany coffee table lights up, casting a pale blue glow into the dim room. I set down my steaming mug of tea and pick up the tablet. I tap the screen to access the night vision perimeter cameras. The cameras reveal the massive iron gates at the bottom of the long winding gravel driveway. Through the heavy blinding sheets of freezing rain, I see two figures stumbling desperately against the heavy iron bars. They are frantically pushing the intercom button, completely unaware that I disabled the exterior audio feed hours ago. I watch the two figures realize the gate will not open. I watch them discover a small gap near the decorative stone pillar and desperately squeeze their bodies through the muddy landscaping to bypass the security perimeter. They begin to walk up the steep, intimidating gravel driveway. They do not have an umbrella. They do not have a vehicle. They are walking entirely on foot through the thick, treacherous, freezing mud. I tap the screen again, switching to the primary high-definition camera mounted directly above the heavy oak front door. I zoom in on the two miserable soaked figures dragging themselves up the wooden porch steps. It is Patricia and Richard. The sight of them is absolutely breathtaking in its pathetic misery. The wealthy, arrogant woman who strutted into the corporate boardroom wearing a designer morning dress and demanding $22 million is completely gone. Patricia is soaked straight to the absolute bone. Her expensive designer coat is completely ruined, plastered tightly to her violently shivering body. Her perfectly styled hair now hangs in wet, pathetic, matted rat tails around her pale, terrified face. Her expensive makeup is entirely washed away, leaving her looking old, hollow, and completely defeated. Richard looks even worse. He is shivering so violently that the camera actually picks up the frantic shaking of his shoulders. He is hunched over, desperately trying to protect his face from the biting, freezing wind. And in a twist of absolute perfect cosmic justice, Richard is gripping two cheap, thin black plastic garbage bags in his freezing hands. The sheriff had literally given them only a few moments to gather whatever meager belongings they could carry before throwing them out into the street. The heavy, wet plastic bags hit the wooden porch planks with a pathetic, dull thud. The psychological symmetry of the moment is absolutely perfect. The universe has meticulously recreated the exact same scenario from 20 years ago, but the roles are now permanently, flawlessly reversed. Systemic justice is rarely this exact, but when it happens, it is beautiful to witness. Patricia begins to frantically pound her fists against the heavy oak front door. Even through the thick, insulated walls of the sprawling estate, I can easily hear the muffled, desperate sound of her wailing. Evelyn, she screams, her voice raw, hoarse, and entirely stripped of its former toxic pride. Evelyn, please open the door. Please, Evelyn, we know you are in there. Please, we are freezing out here. I do not rush. I do not feel a single ounce of panic. I sit in the warm leather chair and take a deep, slow breath, letting the immense, satisfying power of this magnificent reality completely wash over my soul. I stand up slowly, pulling the warm fleece blanket tightly around my shoulders like a royal cape. I walk with measured, confident steps across the heated hardwood floors. Every single step I take is a testament to the incredible, unbreakable life Uncle Henry helped me build. I am the absolute, unquestioned master of this fortress now. I reach the heavy oak front door and I pause. I listen to the pathetic, hysterical sobbing on the other side of the thick wood. I can hear Richard's teeth audibly chattering in the freezing cold. I place my hand on the cool brass handle. I unlock the primary deadbolt with a loud, definitive, echoing click. I pull the heavy door open just a few short inches, leaving the thick brass security chain firmly engaged. The freezing, bitter wind instantly whips through the narrow crack, carrying the sharp smell of wet earth and total human desperation. Patricia practically collapses against the heavy doorframe, her wet, ruined face appearing instantly in the narrow gap. Her eyes are wide, frantic, and completely bloodshot. Evelyn, she gasps, her teeth rattling so hard she can barely form the words. Oh, thank God. Thank God you are here. Please let us in, Evelyn. Please open the door. I stand in the warm, glowing light of the grand hallway, looking out at the two monsters who utterly destroyed my childhood. I feel absolutely no pity. I feel no sadness. I feel no lingering attachment. I look at them with absolute frozen ice in my veins. The terrified 7-year-old girl who cried in the mud is dead and buried forever. I am the quiet executor of their ultimate justice. Evelyn, please, you have to help us. Patricia begs, tears streaming down her freezing cheeks, mixing with the heavy rain. The bank took absolutely everything. The sheriff threw us out into the street this morning. We have absolutely zero money. Marcus took the grandchildren and completely abandoned Jessica. My country club friends will not even answer my desperate phone calls. We walked for miles in the freezing rain. We have absolutely nowhere to go, Evelyn. Please, you have to let us stay in the guest house. We will do anything you want. We are your parents, Evelyn. We are family. Richard steps up closely behind her, his face completely devoid of any remaining dignity or pride. Please, Evelyn, he whimpers, a pathetic, cowardly sound that makes me deeply nauseous. It is so incredibly cold out here. We are freezing to death. Please just open the door. We are so incredibly sorry for everything we did. I look directly into Patricia's pleading, terrified eyes. I let the silence stretch for a long, agonizing moment, ensuring she feels the total, crushing, magnificent weight of my absolute, unassailable power. I want her to remember this exact moment for the rest of her miserable existence. I want the cold to seep into her bones, just as it seeped into mine when I was just a helpless child, standing in the exact same type of storm. You are asking me for shelter, I say, my voice perfectly calm, incredibly cold and flawlessly clinical. You are standing on my porch, asking to be brought into the warmth of the home that my uncle built with his silent wealth. You are begging the child you abandoned for charity. Patricia nods vigorously, her wet hair slapping against her cheeks. Yes, Evelyn, please. I am your mother. We are blood. You cannot just leave us out here in the storm. We will freeze. I lean slightly closer to the narrow gap in the doorway. The freezing wind whips my hair, but the fire behind me keeps my core completely warm. I look at the 2 plastic garbage bags resting in the mud at Richard's feet. I look at the ruined designer coat clinging to Patricia's trembling body. 20 years ago, Patricia. I say, my voice slicing through the roar of the thunderstorm. I begged you for warmth. I begged you not to throw me away. I promised I would be good. I promised I would not take up too much space. And you looked down at me from under your large black umbrella, completely shielded from the elements. Patricia squeezes her eyes shut, shaking her head as if trying to physically block out the memory. Evelyn, please, she cries. Do not do this. I was wrong. I was so incredibly wrong. You told me exactly why you were throwing me away. I continue, entirely ignoring her pathetic apologies. You told me I cost too much money to maintain. You told me I was draining the family dry. You told me that every dollar spent on my survival was a dollar stolen from Jessica's future. Richard lets out a long, shuddering sob, dropping his head onto his chest. He knows what is coming. He knows there is no escape from the absolute perfection of this moment. I stare directly into Patricia's eyes, refusing to let her look away. If you're a financial burden, you aren't part of this family, I state, delivering her exact words back to her with devastating precision. The words hit her like a physical, brutal blow to the chest. Her jaw drops open in sheer absolute horror. She stares at me, completely paralyzed by the horrifying realization that her own toxic venom has just sealed her ultimate fate. You made your choice 20 years ago, Patricia. I say, my voice ringing with total, absolute finality. You severed your ties to me to save a few dollars. You are legal strangers to me now. You are nothing but a financial burden, and you are not part of my family. I highly suggest you pick up your garbage bags, walk back down my driveway, and figure it out yourselves. I step back smoothly from the heavy doorframe. Patricia lets out a visceral, horrifying, screaming wail, a sound of pure, unadulterated, crushing agony as she realizes I am actually going to leave her outside in the violent storm. She frantically tries to push her fingers through the gap, begging and screaming my name into the freezing night. I push the heavy oak door forward with absolute unwavering force, pushing her fingers away and completely shutting out her wailing instantly. I engage the heavy brass deadbolt with a loud final echoing click, locking it securely into place. I engage the secondary digital locks, sealing the fortress completely. I turn my back on the front door entirely. I do not look out the peephole. I do not check the security cameras to watch them stumble away into the darkness. I simply wrap my warm fleece blanket tighter around my shoulders and walk slowly, gracefully back toward the roaring fire, leaving them locked out in the absolute freezing dark. 6 months have passed since that freezing torrential night when I finally locked the heavy oak door on my past. The absolute collapse of Patricia and Richard was not just a brief moment of poetic justice. It became their permanent, grueling reality. The massive bank foreclosure completely annihilated their credit scores, freezing them out of any decent housing or financial assistance. The offshore accounts Patricia desperately thought would save them were permanently seized by federal investigators, probing the attempted wire fraud against Uncle Henry's estate. Today, the woman who once spent thousands of dollars on single-use designer shoes and hosted lavish charity galas to feed her massive ego is living in a cramped, damp, single-room motel on the grittiest outskirts of Tacoma. Patricia now works the overnight shift at a massive discount warehouse, sorting bruised fruit and tossing expired dairy products into giant industrial trash compactors. Her perfectly manicured hands are now rough, calloused, and perpetually stained. Richard, the cowardly man who stood by silently while I was thrown into the mud, washes dishes at a 24-hour truck stop diner located right off the interstate highway. They work for minimum wage. They come back to their tiny single room as the sun comes up completely exhausted, reeking of stale, heavy cooking grease and rotting produce. They have absolutely no country club friends left. Their entire social circle completely evaporated the very second the police investigation and their total bankruptcy became public knowledge. Those elite friends literally crossed the street to avoid them now. They are living the exact miserable poor life they always violently sneered at, and they have absolutely no one to blame but themselves. Jessica did not fare any better. Marcus kept his promise with absolute ruthless, terrifying precision. He hired a team of elite, relentless divorce attorneys who completely and methodically dismantled her entire life. Because of the undeniable recorded audio proving her eager complicity in the estate fraud and her vile, casual bigotry, the family court judge showed her absolutely zero mercy. Marcus was granted full and absolute physical and legal custody of their children. Jessica was granted supervised visitation for exactly 4 hours a month inside a sterile court-appointed facility, watched closely by a social worker. Marcus completely severed her from his massive accounts. The giant trust fund she constantly bragged about was legally dissolved and fully returned to Uncle Henry's estate. Jessica moved into a tiny, noisy studio apartment above a busy intersection. She is currently working the retail makeup counter at a dying suburban mall, desperately trying to maintain the pathetic illusion of wealth to random customers who have no idea she's a completely broken, bankrupt fraud. As for me, I am sitting by the massive stone hearth in Uncle Henry's beautiful estate, watching the bright morning sunlight pour through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The air inside the house is warm and smells like fresh pine needles and rich, expensive coffee. For the first time in 20 long years, my shoulders are completely relaxed. I am breathing freely, deeply, and without a single ounce of fear. The constant, heavy, suffocating weight of trying to prove my basic worth to people who never valued me is entirely gone. I do not feel bitter. I do not feel angry. I just feel an immense, profound, and beautiful peace. But Uncle Henry did not leave me this massive, silent wealth portfolio just so I could sit alone inside a big house and count the money. He wanted me to use my brilliant mind to build something that truly mattered. Last month, I officially launched the Henry and Evelyn Davis Foundation. It is a massive comprehensive scholarship and housing program specifically designed for abandoned children and youth who are aging out of the foster care system. We provide full university tuition, secure housing stipends, and unlimited mental health resources to kids who were thrown away by the very people who were supposed to protect them. We fund kids who were falsely told they were financial burdens. We support kids who stood shivering in the freezing rain and thought they were entirely alone in a dark, terrifying universe. We give them the heavy financial armor they desperately need to build their own beautiful, independent lives. I took the absolute deepest, darkest trauma of my childhood, and I actively turned it into systemic, undeniable hope for hundreds of other kids. Every single time I sign a massive scholarship check, I am taking a heavy sledgehammer to the toxic legacy my biological parents tried to leave behind. I'm proving that silent wealth can be a profound force for incredible good. If you are listening to this right now, I want you to remember one crucial, absolute truth. Blood does not automatically make you family. Shared DNA does not give anyone the infinite right to abuse, exploit, or violently abandon you. True family is about mutual respect, fierce loyalty, and choosing to show up for each other every single day without expecting a financial return on investment. If you are carrying the heavy, crushing weight of toxic family members who only value you for what they can aggressively extract from you. I want you to know that you are allowed to put that massive weight down right now. You are absolutely allowed to walk away. You are allowed to lock the heavy door and fiercely protect your own beautiful peace. Setting boundaries is not an act of cruel revenge. It is an act of basic, necessary survival. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end of this long journey. If my story gave you hope today, or if you have ever had to bravely build your own family entirely from scratch, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel right now. It truly helps these important stories reach the exact people who desperately need to hear them. I want to know exactly where you are sitting right now. Drop a quick comment telling me your city, your country, and the exact time you are watching this video. I love seeing how far these messages of survival travel across the world. Remember, you are entirely worthy of a beautiful, safe life, completely on your own terms. Do not let anyone ever tell you otherwise. I will see you in the next story. If you are sitting there right now watching this screen and feeling the heavy, crushing weight of a family that only takes from you, I need you to listen to my voice very carefully. I know exactly how much it hurts. I know the profound, paralyzing guilt that completely washes over you when you finally decide you have had enough. Society conditions us to believe that setting boundaries with our parents or our siblings is the ultimate betrayal. We are taught to endure absolute misery just to maintain the fragile illusion of a happy home. But let me tell you the absolute truth. Setting firm, unyielding boundaries is never a betrayal. It is a fundamental act of survival. You are not required to sacrifice your own mental health, your financial stability, or your basic human dignity just to appease people who refuse to respect you. You simply cannot pour from an empty cup. For 20 long years, I let my biological parents drain every single drop of hope and energy I possessed until I was completely hollowed out. I thought that if I just gave them a little more, if I just made myself a little smaller, they would finally love me. But toxic people do not want your love. They want your absolute compliance. You should never ever set yourself on fire just to keep people warm, especially when those exact same people are the ones who deliberately threw you out into the freezing cold. You owe them absolutely nothing. Do not let them weaponize your empathy against you. Do not let them use the word family as a free pass for systematic, emotional, and financial abuse. The most beautiful lesson I learned from Uncle Henry is that blood absolutely does not make a family. Shared DNA is just a biological accident. True family is built entirely on fierce loyalty, unconditional love, and showing up for each other every single day without expecting a massive return on investment. Family is the people who actively choose you, the people who invite you in from the storm and give you a safe place to heal. You hold the absolute power to choose who gets access to your life. You get to build your own table, and you get to decide exactly who is worthy of a seat. Have you ever found yourself in this incredibly difficult position? Have you ever had to summon the terrifying courage to draw a hard, permanent line and completely cut off toxic family members to save yourself? Please tell me your brave story in the comments below. I read every single one, and this community is a safe space for your truth. If my journey resonated with you today, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more true stories of ultimate justice and survival. And before you go, drop a comment letting me know exactly what state or country you are watching from right now and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Until next time, please always remember your absolute worth.